welcome everybody. I think you all know already, I'm Dorina, and I've been doing this summit now. This is day 3, and we have just had a great time these last 2 days because the speakers, as good as I thought they were going to be, were better than I was expecting, and everything has just been absolutely wonderful. So um, today we're going to start off with James Collier, who my new friend, who I'm going to tell you how I met him because it's kind of funny. I don't know, a while back, I was on LinkedIn looking. I said, you know what? I wonder if anybody else writes about the Rossetto effect like I do. So I just put Rossetto effect in the search and I found all these people. So I picked like 2 or 3 that I thought were interesting. And this one here was the number one guy that I thought, this guy looks cool. I saw your picture's cool. Yeah, you're cool, dude. Him and his tattoos and things. So I was like, so I contacted him and he's actually written a book called Well Fed, which has been out 11 weeks in Europe and is not even out yet in the United States. And I gotta brag, I have an autographed copy. Okay. So anyway, so I'm very excited because he is a nutritionist, and let's see what else. He has a founder of a company, a product called Huel. Huel's the product, right? Or is that the
It's the
company?
company and the product, both.
The company and the product. So we'll let him tell you about it. Well, it's a nutritionally complete, sustainable food. Okay, but we'll get into that because we joked around about, he does this like, what is it, like a
It's a
meal
completely
replacement?
incomplete food, yeah.
Okay. And I'm always talking about let's cook and eat slow at the table, but there's a place for everything. So we'll get into that later. But anyway, so welcome, James. I'm really glad to have you here today.
Great to be here.
So why don't you tell us, let's start. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Because you can tell us about you better than I can tell them about you.
Thank you for the introduction, and I will talk a bit about myself so people know why I'm here and
Yes.
why I might have something interesting to say or not. We'll find out. So, my name is James Collier. I've been working in the nutrition field for over 30 years. I studied back in the early 90s nutrition and dietetics. Then I went and worked as a clinical dietitian in the UK National Health Service, NHS, for several years, where I would help people, outpatient clinics with people with weight problems, diabetes, food allergies. But more of my work was with inpatients, helping the critically ill. Some people needed tube feeding, like the nasogastric tubes or the PEG tubes, to make sure they're getting sufficient nutrition while they're ill or help recovery, multiple different conditions. I always knew working in the NHS wasn't for me, too much bureaucracy and low pay, but I knew it was a necessary part of my experience and learnings. And I look back now and I'm so glad I did it. It was so useful in many ways. Then I went and worked in the fitness and bodybuilding world for a lot of years, mostly still with nutrition, but not always. I did show promotion stuff as well and a few other entrepreneurial ventures that just didn't work out. I ran a busy bodybuilding website, but I always, since the latter days of my NHS days, up until a few years ago, had a consultancy where I would advise people on tailored advice face to face. I would do seminars, write product development, and then back in 2014, I received an email from a guy who had this great idea, and a year later we launched. That idea was of his was Huel. Julian is the main founder, and I'm co-founder. It was his idea, and it was my recipe. Now, what is Huel? Just I should mention that it is nutritionally complete, sustainable food with we said with minimal impact on animals and the environment. People are making bad food choices. Traditionally, people would prepare their own meals. People aren't doing it, so we provided an option that was for people who are making bad food choices and are health conscious. But now, if people can shop correctly, can prepare food for their family, can enjoy food with the family, then Huel is not for them, and there's no way I want to change that. But how many people are doing that for 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, even 2 meals a day, 7 days a week? Of course, we've got someone here who's,
Yeah, we got
but
someone.
but
But
it's
yeah,
we've got people are busy doing their other things. They're inventing things like technology to do podcasts across the world. So while other people create the food. So what we're addressing is for those meal times where people are making otherwise bad food choices. And you should absolutely challenge me on this because we're here talking about the benefits of community. And I'm going to talk a bit about the science of community sharing food here today, which I think you'll find really interesting. So, people who may have looked me up knowing I was coming here before, and I think, hang on, this guy, James, he talks about this Huel product, which is all about convenience and about eating food on your own. Yet he's coming to talk to us about sharing foods and the benefit of that today. I get it. I can see the contradiction there, but it's everything. So that's who I am. That's what I do. I'm now out in this big wide world. I'm kind of part-time at Huel now because I've got a brilliant team and we've got a very successful business. We're big in America and the UK and Europe and Japan. Other parts of the world, not so much. Canadians, I'm sorry. You struggle to get hold of us. We're working on that. Um, Malaysians as well, actually, not too strong over there either. But so I'm now trying to do this what I call being a nutrition communicator, because I can't think of a better word, which is writing the book. I write on Substack where I share a lot of my ideas about nutrition, usually my frustration about nutrition misinformation and food beliefs. I will go on podcasts, been on a couple of high profile ones, talk to press and do lovely webinars like this, but also do the social media thing where I stand in my kitchen talking to my camera and then post some videos. So if anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, they can, or LinkedIn. And so, yeah, that's the background of me. Shall I continue, Dorina, and talk about my...
Well, let's jump into, so yes, I do think that even though I am the one that will talk about let's eat, let's cook, let's take the time, let's learn how to do it properly. But for example, right now I'm teaching so many people who have no clue whatsoever. I've had people come to me at the zero level. A lot of people just want to learn more recipes, they want to expand. And then there's the people at zero. And someone at zero who's trying to get healthy and learn. Well, in the meantime, Huel's a great option for those in between times when they haven't figured it out yet. And they're like, okay, well, is it McDonald's or a healthy meal that you've created? So, there's definitely a place for these things. And yes, I too am sometimes on the run. Sometimes I'm sitting in my office down right here in the piazza, okay, and Pasquale's like, when is dinner? And I'll get home and I'm like, let's make a sandwich real quick because I'm busy, and even I do that. But still it's, with good fresh mozzarella and tomato and basil, so it's not so bad on whole grain Italian bread. But these things are important because right now we have so much quick food that's crap that people fall into that because it's quick, because it's easy. So if you've created a product that's quick, easy, and healthy, then it definitely has value. Now, in the meantime, I know in chapter 8 of your book, the reason I found you because you wrote about the Rossetto effect and how important and all the other studies you've done in as far as nutrition and everything, how important connection is alongside of the actual physical nutrition, the connections. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I'm going to leave, just allow me 2 more minutes to give some backstory to that, how I came to that.
Okay.
So my background is human nutrition. As I've said, I've worked in the clinical side, humans, and in the fitness and bodybuilding side, humans. And then when we started Huel, and we started looking at how sustainable we are from an environmental side, and I started looking at the data. And this wasn't what I was trained in. And I'm a bit of a science nerd, and I was looking at this, and I thought this is something we need to be concerned about: the impacts of the food system on the environment, climate change, land use, water use, biodiversity, and other metrics like that, which can be measured now. And this was probably 2016. We've been going for about a year. And then so in 2019, I thought, if I want to be intellectually honest and live my life correctly, I need to and I know the food choices I make don't just affect me, they affect others and the environment too. And by others, I mean humans and non-humans. Then I need to change the way I eat. So I reduced I'm not a vegan and I possibly never will be, but I did reduce the amount of animal derived calories I have. And So I have around about 10% of my calories come from animals now. Now, for perspective, the European and American average is about 28 to 30% coming from animals. And the rest is a plant-rich diet. Then the pandemic came, we all got a bit bored, and I started writing some essays. So I thought I'll write these down, these three pillars: eating for your physical health, eating for sustainability, and also considering the ethics. Because as I learned more, I realized I'm really not happy about some of these ultra intensively farmed animal farming methods. So I researched that and put these essays together, and then a few months went by, early 2021. I said to my wife, I think this isn't essays, this is a book. So I thought I'd have four pillars: physical health, mental health, sustainability, and ethics. But as I started, you can see where I'm going with this, I realized, looking at the data, it's not just what we eat, but it's how we eat and who we eat with. I thought, I can't put this into any of the others. Sure, there's mental health and it plays into that, but this is something different. This is a whole pillar in itself. So I came up with this strategy called contemplative nutrition, and that was the basis for the book. So if you look at the book, it's in 11 chapters, three parts. Part one is why, what's the problem? Part two is the five pillars, the five chapters, and part three is looking at in chapter nine. I bring in a new concept to the world that I'm hoping academics will pick up and run with. And then the penultimate chapter is all about food technology and food science and stuff that most people here probably won't resonate with so much. And then the final chapter is where I look at all the nuances and think, how can you as an individual do this? So Well Fed is not a diet book, but it's a food theory book. But crucially, it's a food theory book that's about what we as individuals can do. So in order to sort of now try and address your question, Dorina, about
Yes.
the importance of who we eat with, meal times, sharing food with, why it plays into my contemplative nutrition. The important thing I'm trying to make here is nothing is mutually exclusive. Our food choices affect others and the animals around us, but we can make better food choices. We've got increased rates of non-communicable disease. We've got an unsustainable food system and got questionable farming methods. But the great thing is we can address them all together. And by preparing, so for example, preparing food for other people, science has shown us, data tells us that you're more likely to make more healthful food choices because you're preparing food for other people, and you want them to, of course, enjoy your food, enjoy the food, but you also more feel people are going to judge you on what
Yeah.
you're making. But either way, you're making better food choices. And there's also a benefit of possibly preparing the food, that is the sharing experience. And the Rosito effect, which you all know about, plays into this. When I was researching that, I came across the Rosito effect. I thought, wow, this is pointing in the right direction. And then we can look at the science and see how the science validates that, and we know that the benefits of community. And when we adjust, the data is interesting, because if we adjust that data for healthy lifestyles like right food choices, fat and sugar, and working conditions and smoking, it still plays into it. It's all separate. So this means there's something uniquely beneficial from the science, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, that demonstrates that there is actual benefit from sharing, community, and everything that goes with it. There's a concept known as behavioral synchrony. Now, let me tell you what this is. So there's some really cool work done by a famous professor called Robin Dunbar, who still works out of Oxford now, and some people may have heard. If you're into psychology, you've probably heard of him in his anthropology work on the Dunbar number, like how many meaningful connections we can form with other people. The Dunbar number is said to be about 150 people, which is in evolutionary terms. When we were tribal, that might be the broader tribe might be between sort of 120 and 180 people, and you can form a meaningful connection with them. And that's called Dunbar number. But I'm not focusing on that today, because Robin Dunbar has done some really, really cool work. And some work he did was with rowers. And he found that the rowing team, when they're rowing together in synchrony with each other, they release these things called endorphins. Now, endorphins are a feel-good chemical. They're what, if you laugh, endorphins are released. They make you feel good. But crucially, if you're feeling down, you have a good cry and you feel just a little bit better, or at least not quite so bad, endorphins are released through crying, but they're also released through exercise. But the interesting thing was that Dunbar found that not just when the rowers are rowing together, when they're in the gym training with their teammates at the same time, they train harder than when they're in the gym on their own or training around other people. That's interesting. But there's more. He also found by some work that he started looking at, there's a big study. Does anyone know the Eden Project in Cornwall in the UK, where there's these big domes and they've made sort of different what's the word? Like, they've got one of the Amazonian rainforest in one dome. They've got another one from another from an eastern forest. There's three big domes, and
Oh,
it's a unique part in the world. I only went a couple of years ago, and this is relatively speaking on my doorstep. It's like 4 hour drive. So I urge people to go to the Eden Project. It's a great thing. But they do a lot of scientific studies there, and there was the big lunch. I think it started in 2007, and it was an opportunity to get people to the clues in the name, have lunch together and experiment on them, see how how they're affected, see how they behave. And this went on for several years. And he didn't write up at this paper until 2017. But he noticed that with the sharing of food, behavioral synchrony plays into this as well. When we share food together, endorphins are released when we share meals together. And these are the same substances that I've spoken about when rowers are training together. That's interesting. So there's some sort of feel-good behavior, and that's one chemical. Synchronized behavior. Now, it's not like the fact that we all sit down and we go on your marks, get set, go, and start chewing at the literally in sync. It's the general feeling that we start a meal together, roughly eat a meal together. But obviously, while we're sharing food as well, we're having a conversation. We might be at the end of typically at the end of the day is the most common meal that people share, and there's good reason that it should be as well. You might have had a tough day at work. You want to offload it a little bit with your friends and family, and that can help you feel better about it. Or you might have had a great day at work, and you want to share that experience with your family, and they can share in your positivity as well. So that's endorphin, but I want to talk about three more chemicals as well. The next one is oxytocin, and people may have heard of this. This is most well known for the mother-baby bonding. It's released when mothers are lactating, and they're just with their newborns. But there's so much more that oxytocin does. It's quite a hormone that has a lot going on. It's actually, and not relevant for our conversation here, involved in social bonding, but also with othering. So, you got if you're in a tribe, for instance, and you release oxytocin, it connects you with people in your tribe, but makes you feel negatively about people who are not in your tribe, which in itself implies that we should be social bonding. Now, how does oxytocin play into sharing of food behavior? Well, this was actually something that was learned from people from anorexics. Anorexia, which is the condition where people, most predominantly girls, although worryingly, it's becoming increasingly more prevalent in males, adolescent males as well, in body dysmorphia. But they feel that there's a fear of fatness, there's a fear of gaining weight, and they sort of shun food. But the biggest fear is meal times, and that's not just because of the food, but there's one of the reasons that uh, psychologists or neuroscientists feel that that could play into a cause of this is they have a very low level of oxytocin. This has been found that anorexics have this very low level of this bonding chemical. And this could be something genetic. It could be something that's part of their early relationships. And through that, they found that oxytocin actually does increase when meals are shared, which is interesting. So there is some sort of bonding that seems to happen at a physiological level. And I've spoken a little bit about endorphins. I've spoken a bit about oxytocin. When you share food and you break bread with people. Now, most of you have probably heard about a third chemical that I want to talk about called cortisol. Now, cortisol works the other way. It's the stress one. It's associated with not feeling so good. I mean, it's there for very good reason. It's like that siren in our head when we're stressed, and from an evolutionary perspective, it knew that there was potential danger around, and we should be a little bit be a bit heightened. But unfortunately, in the modern world, we have what we call in the UK sometimes post office syndrome. When you're in the queue for the post office, you know your parking ticket's about to run out, and you're feeling really, really stressed because you know you're going to get a parking ticket if you can't get to the queue soon and get back to the car. So you're feeling stressed, and it's completely irrational. It is not a life and death situation. But what does oxytocin do? It actually has been shown to diminish levels of cortisol. So the thing by sharing food that you can actually help you lower cortisol. So breaking bread can boost these two feel good chemicals and lower this feel not so good chemical, which is interesting.
It
Now,
is interesting.
the fourth one I want to talk about. Can you see that chemical picture on my wall there?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, that is the chemical symbol for happiness. I'll have it there to remind me to be happy.
Oh, I want that.
So serotonin, you might have heard of serotonin, one of the happy hormone, the feel-good uh, chemical. That's the chemical symbol for serotonin. And this plays a role here as well. This is associated with being around other people, again, happiness, praise, and sharing experiences. Yeah, we can talk a bit about alcohol, but alcohol on a direct physiological level is basically a toxic substance. But I don't like to say it's black and white like that. I don't like to say that we shouldn't be having anything because it's toxic, because when you have a little bit to drink, you might be someone who's a little bit anxious, and alcohol can help you boost serotonin a bit indirectly because you're more likely to want to talk to other people, and that can then indirectly release serotonin. And so this is why it can be, and I don't want to encourage too much drinking, but if you're the certain personality type is a little bit more reserved, having a drink with some food might just help bring your anxieties down and make you be part more of the conversation, which can have feel good effects. So they're the sort of the four main chemicals that I've just briefly introduced that are all involved in social bonding around meal times.
That's why all my Italian friends are so happy. We're drinking a glass of wine with our dinner all together. Got all of it put together in one place. But it does it because it relaxes you. I mean, and when you're relaxed, you tend to be more open. So yeah, I love that. Um, so now, how do you feel about like in general, like with today's society? Like, do you think it's okay? I'm going to ask you straight up. Like, do you think this movement I'm on, this mission I'm on to get families back to the table, do you think there's hope?
We should try and urge people to do this. I mean, and we should, it's not an all or nothing. We don't say to people, if you can't do at least 2 meals a day, eating with other people, it's just not good enough. We say, well, encourage people to eat together, share meals together whenever they can. And look, I'm always conscious about saying this, that there's a lot of people today from broken families. There are single parents, and some of these are trying their hardest. And to just throw something into them and say, well, you should be eating meals with your family as well, it's just not really very helpful. So we we just need to try and encourage people to do so when they can. Now, part of the problem is some people who are maybe on struggle a bit more financially, and they're single parents, then maybe their shopping habits can't. It's very hard for them. Let's say they live, I'm a Brit, so I'll talk about London here. They live in a sky-rise block of flats, apartments, in the UK. Nearby, there might not actually be. There'll be shops and they can buy food, but there'll be small corner shops. And we've got this concept of food deserts. Now,
Mhm.
some of you may have heard this term. It's a bigger issue actually in America, which is we're within a reasonable distance from where people live. They don't have access to true healthy food like fruit, veg, and whole grains because the shopkeeper, that it's not worth their time and money to buy it because it's just going to perish because people weren't buying it because it's quite expensive for them to bring it in on the supply chain and stuff. So, and it is to some degree in parts of the East End of London, I've heard, there's a large amount of takeaway or takeout restaurants where you can go down and get quite an affordable burger or a kebab that's full of calories and fats, but not very nutritious in other ways. And people, that's okay sometimes, but these parents are doing their best to bring up their kids, They haven't been taught the skills themselves. So, and what do I mean by skills? It's shopping skills that many people here, including myself, we take for granted. I know how to shop. Well, look, I'm a nutritionist for 30 years, so I don't. I've got a problem, right? But it's
Exactly.
we can be innovative with these skills, but people just don't know. They've not been taught these skills, so we shouldn't shun them. So what can we do? I know I don't know what goes on in the rest of the world, but we've got a high profile chef, TV chef in the UK called Jamie Oliver. He tried his best a few years ago to get people cooking, preparing food, but with affordable foods. And this is
Yeah.
what's really helpful, and doing and to go back into schools. So we've got another guy in the UK at the moment who I have met, a guy called Henry Dimbleby. His father and grandfather were quite famous newsreaders in the UK, and he's around about my age. He's in his 50s, and he's written the National Food Strategy, and he campaigned with the last government, the Conservative government, and he got nowhere. He's got the new Labour government in the UK that have been here for a few months now. They are supposedly listening to him, and he's trying again, and he is trying to he's trying to tackle all angles of the food system, agriculture to food industry. But crucially, he's also trying to get people these shopping to try and teach kids these shopping skills and food preparation skills. So if people have the food preparation skills, then they can share people. Now, I think for younger millennials and Gen Zers, we're going to struggle. But there's nothing. I think they call it the next one, Generation Alpha. Is that right?
Alpha, I think
Yeah,
is, yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's not too late for this is who we need to be targeting,
Yeah.
because if we can get the younger Gen Zs and the Generation Alphas, and I'm not saying it's too gone for anyone, but on a mass scale, I think you got to hit where you can hit hard, hit the best. So we need to be teaching this in the schools. These are life skills. It's all very well doing what I do and learn about the science of nutrition. That's all lovely, but really it's more fundamental to this. And one phrase that I use in the book, nutrition science isn't rocket science. We're all told you've got all these social media influencers going out there, food fear mongering, and don't not start me on this because you'll get me. I won't. They're saying people do not eat this and
I'll
not
be
eat
with
that.
you.
And some will say don't eat oats; they're toxic. They're not. They're really one of the best nutritious foods. Don't have these whole grains. Don't have this fruit. And some foods, of course, they say people not to have. It's probably wise to be minimal on. But you've got them going out there causing confusion, causing and then in another note they're selling their latest supplement, which is very expensive, and it's unrealistic. So we should be using social media to try and put positive messages out. What can people learn? How can people learn the more fundamentals rather than what protein does and what vitamin B12 does? Just what's good food. Can we prepare good meals? What's some useful tips that people might find interesting?
Let me ask you a question. How can people tell the difference between one of these people online who is actually knows what they're okay, let's say you have an Instagram, right? So
Yeah.
you're out here and you've got something on Instagram, and we know because we're sitting here talking to you personally, not just on a video, that you know what you're talking about. You've studied this for this many years. You've got, Cody things and you know, things on your wall and all kind of stuff. So, how can people tell the difference, and who and where do they, how can they figure it out? Give
That's
me.
this. Yeah, I love this question. And this is if I've just been quite disparaging of some of these social media influencers, and I also said I've got an Instagram account. But if people should, if anybody's asking me now, why should we listen to you, James? Then you're halfway there. If you're asking that question, I love it. Now, in the book, I actually got a whole chapter on misinformation in there, chapter 3, and there's 10 watch outs in there, 10 takeaways, but I'll share some of them with you now. The first one is if anybody talks in absolutes, like says, you should eat this and don't eat that, they're very likely talking a load of rubbish, and I would swipe on. If they food fearmonger, they tell you again, they say this food is toxic and inflammation. That's another. In fact, using words like toxic, insulin will cause inflammation without qualifying what they mean. It's all right to use technical terms, but at least tell people what they mean. They're using terms they probably don't understand themselves. I've used a few technical terms today, and hopefully I've given at least some degree of what they mean. The other one, of course, is are they being transparent about their ulterior motives? Everybody has ulterior motives. I have an obvious one. I'm co-founder of a successful food company. And if I ever talk about Huel in my videos, I will mention, I have to actually legally mention that I'm an investor and co-founder. But even if I don't, it's something, something else. It's large as life in all my bios of my social media account. And there'll be, and it's okay for other people to have them. Just are they being transparent about these ulterior motives? And I think that's important. Um, the other one is, do they talk in this very evangelical style? Like, I can heal you, I can fix you. Um, don't listen to them. I know the answer. It's classic populism. I call it nutrition populism. And it's if they're in that sort of evangelical style, very likely to click on. So let's spin it the other way. Who should you listen to? Well, if somebody's talking in this very non-committal, nuanced, maybe even a bit vague terms, they're very likely someone who should be listened to. And what I say is they are confidently unconfident in what they're saying because science is nuanced, science is vague, science is course correcting itself. So there are no absolutes, but they should be quite strong in that they should be quite have some conviction with their broader message, but with some nuance in there. There are people that you should that are probably more likely, and they will get it wrong sometimes. I'm pretty sure I've got stuff wrong sometimes, but they will be broadly honest communicators. Unfortunately, they generally don't have as big a followings because, hey, people clickbait is or negativity these days.
That to me is speaks volumes because, when it comes to nutrition, it is hard because there's so much we're being bombarded every day. We do need to pay attention and don't get swayed because some of these people are so convincing,
Mhm.
they really and check their credentials. I know that much. I've looked people up before, and sometimes that matters. Sometimes, they're fake, I guess, but
Yeah.
and sometimes they a little knowledge then becomes too, is a little knowledge is dangerous. So yeah, be careful about that, everybody. If nothing else, buy organic, try to find, non-GMO, whole grains, leafy greens, lots of bitter greens, fruits and vegetables. That's a good start, wouldn't you
That's
say,
right.
James?
Yeah. Whole grains. Whole
Whole
grains.
grains, absolutely. Is there anything else you would like to just share out of
Yes,
your own?
you've just got the coffee in front of you. I should just briefly mention hot drinks and caffeine. I think this is something interesting to share.
Okay, tell me before I take a sip.
Yeah,
Is that
so
good or
what
bad?
time is it where you are?
It's the last one I will have for the day.
Okay. So
It's uh
yeah,
it's
it's
5:45.
caffeine's great. There are possible health and cognitive benefits, focus of caffeine, but too much can give some people the jitters. Some people are more sensitive than others. But also, we've spoke a lot about food choice and community on how they are predictors of living well. There are others like body weight, there is exercise, there is stress, which they all play into each other. But one of them is sleep, of course, if you get inadequate sleep. Now, sleep quality is really important. Now, caffeine is great, but the problem is it affects the levels of a neurotransmitter called adenosine, which is builds up over the course of the day and makes you feel sleepy until it's time to go to sleep. Caffeine can block that. Now, the problem is having too much caffeine is known for wakefulness. Some people will have a coffee last thing at night and say they sleep fine. I would challenge that because is their sleep quality really good? Now, what I was doing, being a massive coffee lover that I am, I thought, well, I won't have one, say, after 1 p.m. because it will be gone by then. But I was having 5 or 6 coffees in the morning till then. Now, the half-life of caffeine, this is the amount of caffeine in the blood before it falls up to half its level, is 5 or 6 hours. So I thought, well, that's okay. But if you're building up and I was having five, roughly say 100 milligrams of caffeine in a coffee, let's say I was having six of them, that's 600 milligrams of coffee. If the half-life's 5 or 6 hours, that means the quarter life is 10 to 12 hours. Do the maths. I'll still add about 100, 150 milligrams of caffeine in my blood at bedtime. That's just like me not having a coffee all day and having a big, big one just before bed, which we probably
So
would.
the caffeine is cumulative during the day.
It's cumulative. It falls off, but it will be
Interesting.
cumulative from having it. So I now probably mildly unsuccessfully like try and limit myself to three or four, probably the three, or maybe two coffees and a tea, which has got caffeine but less caffeine typically.
Right. Well, I
Um,
will give a quick coffee lesson. because this is from the food side of me. An espresso, which is the only thing I drink, has about 60 grams, 60 milligrams, or what is it? Is it
Milligrams, yeah.
milligrams of caffeine?
Yeah.
And an American cup of coffee has 120, 140, 160, 180, 200, depending if it's like that Death Wish coffee. And so people always say, oh, I can't have an espresso, it's so strong. But in actuality, now if you do apples to apples and you have this much espresso equal to that much coffee, yes, it will have more, but nobody drinks espresso that way. We drink espresso like this.
Mhm.
So I only have 2 of those a day, so that's not too bad, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. And there's actually been some research about on the actual temperature of the drink that can promote some feel-good chemicals. I can't remember whether it's serotonin or oxytocin here, but there's actually so decaf coffee, green tea, which does some caffeine in it but less. There's actually something good. And I'm a Brit, right? We're known for loving our cups of tea, and there's something really nice we do if a friend's feeling ill, you might go around and make them a nice cup of tea to make them feel better. Someone's feeling a bit down, they've had a bit of a cry. What's the one? I don't know whether it's the same in America, but in the UK, we're well known. Someone's feeling down, a friend will come around and make a cup of tea for them. It's the gesture of making the drink as well. And
Yeah.
this is the sharing thing again, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that's been quantified in any science, but we do it. It feels good. Feels like the right thing
It
to do.
does. I mean, my favorite part of the coffee, I'll be honest with you, is when it's brewing. The aroma just
Yeah.
warms my heart. And even if I don't drink it, I can just sit here and smell
I
it.
get
And
that.
yeah,
I
it's
get
good
that.
stuff. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, James, thank you so much. So on here, let's see. Well, we've already Summer put the title of your book.
Yeah.
And let's see. Um, okay, everything's on there, and I'm going to send you the titles of those other books too. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping everybody, you got to check out this book now. It's already out in Europe. It's not out yet in the States,
But
but
you can pre-order it. It's available for
you can
pre-order from
pre-order
Amazon.
it. So pre-order it so you get one of the first ones,
Yeah.
and then you can say you sort of met him.
But it's
For someone who's been on the fence of buying this book, chapter 7, I was looking through it, contemplating the ethics of what we eat. I'm
the
just
fun.
going to take 20 seconds and read this, okay? When was the last time you looked at an animal you eat in the eyes? I don't mean the specific animal you consumed, but the species. When did you last look a cow in the eyes, a pig, a lamb, or a chicken? Obviously, this question applies only to meat eaters, but this thought experiment serves to illustrate the disconnect between modern life and what we eat. Wow, this really hits hard. I never thought about it this way before, but it's such a powerful reminder to know like how disconnected we are from reality of food. Definitely, this makes me reflect on my choices.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that bit, Stella. I actually got that from the novelist from fiction, from John Berger, who just the insight. I'm reading some of his work, and I thought this just plays into like the disconnect that modern food systems have on what people eat. People don't know. I mean, another analogy is it's you see men, running the barbecue. And this stems back from when they used to go hunting, and then they'd be roasting the animal across a fire. There's the virility and macho-ness that comes with it. Sorry for anyone who's woke here, but but now what do? They go to the supermarket, buy a plastic pack of steak, stand there with a silly pillar with a naked lady on the front and trying to look all macho, tossing the meat. It's not really the same, but yet these habits are brought in.
Yeah. There's so many people who've only ever had meat and they don't even know what the animal or the piece of the body that the meat comes from looks like because they've only ever seen it in a plastic wrapped package.
Yeah.
And to know that, first of all, I mean, yes, I do eat meat, but I appreciate the fact that this animal, hopefully gave some life to me for some of the protein it gave me, and like I have friends who have goats and they have them mostly for their milk. And when a new baby goat is born, if it's female, they keep it for more milk. And if it's male, unfortunately, it ends up being dinner at some point as a baby because when they're young. But they give it love until it dies, kind of like what was it, Temple Grandin talked
Yes. Yeah.
at least let's treat them humanely, let's take care of them until such time that they're doing their job of feeding us, so I'm a firm believer in that as well. But
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up, Summer. Another point that, he doesn't just talk about the Rosetto effect. I just dragged him in here because that's a piece of what he talks about. But I appreciate anybody that can add some validity to the importance of everything about the table. And, all the people that we've had speaking have been something about that, whether it's, sports or nutrition or psychology or whatever, it all folds together and brings our families together. And a lot of these conversations are good conversations to have at the table. So take some of this information that you're learning today, yesterday, and the day before, and bring it to your table with a recipe that you get off of my YouTube channel, and you can have a nice dinner and a nice conversation. So, James, thank you so much for spending this time with us today, and I can't wait to just see what else you're going to do, because I'm sure some more books are in your head.
Yeah, one on misinformation's in my head, and I'm if anyone wants to read my Substack, the blog Substack, if anyone knows it, Thought for Food. There's a lot of stuff about misinformation I write
Well,
about.
if you can take a second, and is there a link? Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, I'll
right.
find it. Oh, yeah, while
You
we're
find that, you go ahead, you got time to do it, put it in the chat, and if not, send it to me and we'll throw it in, because I'm going to be sending an email out with everybody's info. So if there's anything you want anybody to have, any of your contact information or whatever it is that you're doing, website, all that stuff, throw it in there, okay? All
Yeah.
right.
Right, thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. All right. Next up, we're going to go right along today because I have a feeling the more time we spend and the better we get at this, the more we're talking. So, my next guest is Dr. Ashley Fallon, and he's from England too. So now are you in London?
No, I'm up in Manchester.
Oh, you're up in Manchester. Okay. So we've got two, and James was in, where the heck where's James? Where's James in?
Northamptonshire.
Northamptonshire. Okay, one of those long ones. So anyway, well, Ashley, thank you for coming here today. Thanks for being here yesterday and popping in a few times as well and offering some insight. So, Dr. Ashley has been a psychologist, as I'm dropping all my books here. Well, no, I'm sorry, you're a psychiatrist, correct?
I'm a psychologist, yeah.
Psychologist. Okay. Why don't you tell me, because I'm going to get all the words wrong.
No, don't worry. Yeah, so I'm a psychologist, and there's various different types, as you can imagine. There's clinical psychologists who work with various types of mental health and different types of health. There's forensic psychologists who work with people in the criminal justice system, etc. And I'm both of those. So I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. And basically, it's one of those really rewarding careers that started off very, very simply, just being nosy, just being that curious kid who was always wanting to know what the parents were doing when they were working in some charity or they were doing some sort of committee work, and just being stood outside looking through the window and trying to be well behaved but actually find out what was going on. So I was that little boy who shouldn't have been creeping around the psychiatric hospital, who shouldn't have been going inside the back end of some council office when the meetings were on, and I was just poking around it and finding out what was happening. And there were some real powerful experiences there that led me to, and I'll raise some of them when we get talking. But yeah, I work for the public British National Health System. I also work in private practice in areas of business and working with men who might be particularly struggling to get through self-doubt and worry and concern and try and forge ahead. I also work with young people of all genders and different types of cultural background who might be struggling with what's going on in life early on because their family was really fractured. They might not necessarily have had that privilege of two parents. They might not have had that stability of a home. And as you'll hear as we get talking, they've definitely not had a table to eat around. So there's something about this conference really drew me in when Dorina and I were talking, and it was something about the aspiration of having connection around a family table to role model good eating, good connections, just like James and others have been talking about, that sense of this is good role modeling, this is healthy interaction. Not everybody can get that. And we're surrounded by people that we love and we care about in work and other settings who've not had the background we're talking about here. And we really need to think about that, because actually as we interact with these people and might have had the privilege of a relatively steady upbringing, or we might have had an opportunity to have good diet or learn about healthy food. That work colleague, that loved one, the next love of your life, how they interact with you, and more importantly, how they feel about themselves, but they never tell you. So it's whirring around inside their head, and all you've got is the nonverbal behavior that someone's actually communicating. And I think yesterday there was a really important point that somebody made, that, you know, it's about 10 to 20% of what we communicate is verbal, but the rest of it, we're just talking all the time. And in this remote world we're in now, where we might be speaking to people internationally, or we might actually be even chatting with our friends on a WhatsApp or a FaceTime, they're only getting the shoulder up. They're really not getting the full picture of that message, are they? And that sense of warmth, that sense of connection, the eye contact, it's all a bit disturbed. I'm looking at a screen here, but if I was in front of you, there'd be a lot more turn taking, a lot more looking away and then looking too. So we're living in a world that's pretty hard to navigate. And if we think about the children that are starting off in their home environments, or in institutions, or in care environments, there's some real powerful things we need to focus on, and there's something that we can do when we interact with people like that, even if we're not a professional. And so I'll share a bit of that soon.
I'm going to ask you a few, like, psychological questions, because that's what you do. But, a lot of parents, and I'll say, speaking for myself, we believe that we're doing our best, because we can only do the best that we know, what we've learned in our life, or what we grew up in. And no matter how much we read and stuff, we still default to how we grew up. And we try to, maybe if we realize that maybe wasn't the best, we try to fight against it or learn more about it. But, how can families begin to, like, identify, or parents identify, like, okay, I'm doing something wrong, or, like, destructive patterns in a way that kind of, feel right because they feel normal to me, but I know it's not right. How do we learn these things if we didn't learn them from our family? Who do you ask? How do you figure this stuff out?
It's so important. You're going for the jugular, isn't it? What can we do
right?
to actually help? But I'll just give you some stepping stones, which will hopefully help describe all of these things that can help, just the way we might speak to somebody, the way we might touch somebody. And it has to do with something we were talking about yesterday, and I know James was just referring to it earlier. We evolved to be a certain type of human being. And even though we've had millennia of iPhones and fashion and architecture and art, and we really have moved on a lot from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the meat inside our skull has not evolved that much. So if you think about the millennia with regards to how we've evolved from animals and moving through into humanoids, that was the rapid form of development. But in the last couple of millennia, we really haven't changed that much. So if you think back to the stereotypes of prehistoric and Neanderthal type man living in a plain, smaller community groups, simple type of diet that was seasonal, very much related to the herds that they might be able to hunt, etc. People were breaking bread before they could even bake around a very simple system. And the worry about, will those herds come next season, or will these rains wash away where we live? Or the worry about, will I be able to impress a mate and therefore get the most beautiful woman in the tribe, and I'll potentially live happily ever after. These were the worries. Now, just imagine if you're the man or the woman living back in that time, and you introduce a mobile phone, and we just have a little game here about somebody being able to use it and understand it. What do we actually think? Let's just put it in the chat. Let's just see. What do we think will be a daily pressure that is not about that upcoming seasonal herd change, or it's not about the weather? What would be some daily pressures? Just pop something in the chat that you think would come in day by day and could actually stress you out. So I'll start it for 10.
In those days?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about if we give our stresses now to them. So there might be something about, on the other side of the world, there's a government that's making really big decisions about weaponry and stuff like that. That would be such a threat for that tribe, because they would have no concept of what that could be. Then what about if they had a mobile and there was another tribe that was flashing its muscles, showing off its beauty, showing it's better at fishing? Is that going to make you feel inadequate? If you've never even compared yourself to another tribe, that is going to make you feel a bit uneasy. It's going to make you feel a bit worried. Somebody's put in the chat bills, and just that idea of owing something. Will you be able to swap or barter enough to get rid of that debt? That is a pernicious thing that's running through you all the time, isn't it? And someone's put there the health of children. What if there's a famine? What if the crop fails? What if that herd doesn't come? You have not got enough food. So back then, it was stressful enough. But if you think about what the brain is having to deal with now, and the brain hasn't changed that much in the last 1,000 years, what it has to deal with now is daily, hourly. There's a notification that comes in that there's a war on in a country that's really quite near to you, or there's gross discrimination happening and your children might be affected by that, or there's a shortage of teachers. So the education of your children, it's not going to be as good as it was last year. Or what about a worry about your husband's affair? You've seen something really unusual on a mobile phone. That's really threatening. It's a real sense of fear within the bodily system. Or what about social media, just constantly talking about really negative things? If you think that that's affecting the adult brain, then what are the children accessing? And we know that most of the children are accessing all of this stuff and might be interpreting it differently. But there's a massive increase now in children being aware of climate problems, war, discrimination, racism, you name it. And so those children have a threat that probably, I'm late 40s. So when I was younger, I wouldn't have had that threat coming in my pocket. I wouldn't have had a notification saying there's a war and could this country be enlisted. I didn't know that there was wide scale racism and discrimination that might affect the friend that I had that was a different skin color. So I suppose what I'm describing is there's this very large level of threat that is pervasive all the way around the family network nowadays. Back then it wasn't. So what do we think that would affect on the body? Well, obviously it's the nervous system, isn't it? We're sat in this conference and we're looking with our eyes, we're listening. We can't really touch, Darina. We can't give you a handshake. We can't taste the bread that we're talking about breaking. We can't have any more senses involved than just looking and listening. And that's not the real world. We should be immersed in it. If we were all in a room and in an intimate gathering, we know that this would be a highly intimate. There'll be a lot more laughter. There'll be a lot more exchanging. And so we're doing our best with this technology, aren't we? And it's really working. But taking it back to the actual family, there's so many stimuli that are coming in from different directions. So you set the table, you might have that lovely stereotypical life of a couple of children, a partner. You feel supported, you can afford to put things on the table, and you can afford a couple of hours to produce a great meal. However, all those things, like we said about debt, worry, threat, lack of connection, they're all there, aren't they? And I suppose I started the title of the presentation when we had a chat, Darina, and you said, Ashley, you work with sometimes some bad things that might happen in life. Some people that might have done bad things, but they might not be bad people, but they made a definite difficult decision. And that might be involved in criminality, really intense substance misuse or alcoholism. It might be people who might struggle to be monogamous and therefore have different types of unfaithful relationships. People who might end up with descriptions of narcissism, might be described as toxic, all these sorts of things. And there's a commonality in people who experience all of these things and all these diagnoses and all of these jail sentences, etc. Their early 10 years of their life very much had adversity in different forms that they couldn't overcome and they weren't resilient to get around. All of us here, we're relatively engaging in this conference. We're really thinking about the family system, but we might have gone through all of those difficulties. No one would ever know, but we managed to be resilient and get through it. Whereas some of the stories that some of the young lads told me last week when I was in one of the prisons I was working in, they were saying, my dad used to tell me off if I spoke about my emotions. If I cried, that was seen as feminine, and I was basically encouraged to be quite silent. And so that meant I didn't really understand when I was stressed. So what we have here is sometimes a culture of some aspects of young boys and adolescent males not necessarily knowing what's going on inside their body, why there's turmoil, why there's this sense of overstimulation. And so they're not quite sure necessarily how to handle it. Now, in extreme circumstances, that can lead to people wanting to be aggressive, maybe hurt themselves, maybe get intoxicated just to get away from that terrible feeling of unease or worry. But actually, that means that there's always a better way to let that sort of emotion out. And I suppose there's very, very simple things that are quite toxic in families that we don't really talk about. The big hitters that I don't want to mention because the conference is really positive and it's really, we're all smiling around the table. But the big hitters are violence, abuse, cruelty, all these things that happen in family homes. They do happen around tables. We can't ignore it. But there are other things that aren't as dramatic as that I thought would be nicer to talk about, but are still worrying. And that is silence. And that is suppressing children. That is not encouraging them to let people know what's going on inside their head. It's encouraging them to be perfect. It's encouraging them to be polished and quiet. It's only praising good results at school, only praising good behavior, and not exploring the difficult behavior. So the worries that can then go into the child's head, and the child doesn't have that ability to focus and understand what's going on in their head because they're not emotionally literate as an adult would be. It can really build up and up and up, and then unfortunately some people can end up touching the mental health system, can't they?
You know, with what I'm doing, I'm trying to encourage the positive. I know it's not always positive. I know my own table growing up wasn't always perfect. You know, I tried, and even as much as I tried to make my table with my family better than the one I grew up with, which wasn't horrible, but it wasn't perfect. You know, we all make mistakes. So the question for you is healing possible within the same family system that caused the harm? You know, so say I've screwed up. I'm a parent and I've screwed up, man. I just really feel like I screwed up my kids. Can I still fix it? Is there a way to do that, or do they have to, or is it, you know, do they have to, does it require stepping outside, you know, to talk to somebody like you to fix it before we come back as a unit? Is that possible? Can a family?
That is such a powerful question. And it's something that everybody talks about all the time because there's this real worry that if you've not been a good parent, or you feel like you've been the same parent, and then somebody suddenly says that type of parenting isn't modern, that type of parenting isn't good. And you think, well, I've been like this for 10 years. So there is that worry about will I have caused some bother? Will I have entrenched something? But actually, it's very, very easy to flip that switch and completely change the climate in that family environment. So I don't want to make any assumptions here, but has anybody ever heard the phrase when they've been naughty, or maybe when they've been involved with a challenging child situation? You might have heard that phrase, "What's wrong with you?" And for many of us, that can, you know, make our spine go erect, and we can suddenly think, "Crikey, that reminds me of something not so great." But the first thing that is easy to say is, "What is wrong with you?" And a very easy way to turn that on its head, which doesn't have the accusation in it, which doesn't have the sense of a very difficult answer. Because if you're saying to a young child, "What's wrong with you?" they're not really going to be able to answer that terribly well, are they? Because that's a kind of blaming, labeling thing. But if you say, "What's happened to you? What's happened to you to behave like this?" It instantly encourages an open answer, instantly encourages even a young child to say something different. So when you say, "What's wrong with you?" the child knows that there's not an answer expected. There's just this sense of there's probably a punishment or some disapproval or some rejection on the horizon, because it's just very it shuts down the conversation. What's wrong with you? A child can't answer that. They're in trouble. But what's happened to you? Why are you doing this? That opens up something new. And even young children can say, "She did this." And they're already saying that there was another factor that affected why they might have misbehaved. Or they might have said something like, something happened at school today. Might not know how to describe it, but instantly you then have this idea, okay, so they smashed the toy, or they've not eaten their food. And when I've said, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you eating?" that's not going to get a good answer. But what happened to you today? Why aren't you eating? Or can you tell me about why you're not eating? It instantly, it's an open-ended, it's far more open-ended than the other one, which is more accusatory, isn't it? And actually, you can have a really interesting set of answers that come back. So when I've worked with children who might have been in the care system, or might have been in the early parts of the criminal justice system as teenagers, and they're really not terribly experienced with anybody asking any questions about how they feel or what they're going through, to ask somebody what's happened to you, they are instantly thinking, what dare I say so that I don't get rejected? Because if someone's had a really, really difficult childhood, they're not going to say, well, it all started when, my little sister was born and I felt really rejected and I wasn't as much, it's not going to be as deep as that, but it might be showing that mum or dad or whoever the primary carer is interested. So one of the phrases you sometimes hear is get curious, not furious. Because if you're led by your emotion, naturally most people are, and you can't filter it, and you're going to be very accusatory, probably quite scary, probably as an adult quite big, probably quite loud. And the what's wrong with you, don't do that is going to close things. But the sense of what's happened to you, why are you doing this today? You didn't do that yesterday. Just opening it up with more question marks, and obviously slightly lower volume, and try and keep you cool. There's a sense of, on occasion, even small amounts of that can have a really big impact. Because when I'm working with some of the 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old men and women who might have been in and out of the mental health or the criminal justice system, when they've heard that question said earlier on in their life, or someone in their system has said, what's happened to you to be here, rather than, you have this diagnosis of schizophrenia, you have this diagnosis of depression, let's tackle that. No. What's happened to you to get to a place where someone attached this label to you? And it instantly changes the control. And so that's one little thing that sometimes has a really powerful effect. And even if a family has always behaved the same way, and we do have our rituals, don't we, as families, it's easy just to get into that routine. You can really unsettle that routine by saying something slightly different.
That's an amazing, simple word tweak that I think everybody could take. I mean, I'm assuming that can work with amongst adults as well. You're not just
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got our colleague here, Janae, who was speaking yesterday. She's put there, yes, this is trauma informed. So she'll know as a psychology trained person as well. But what I'm referring to here is trauma, and that can be everything. It doesn't necessarily have to be all the bad stuff we hear about with regards to the harms that little children go through. It could be different types of neglect, being ignored, just being picked slightly differently than your other siblings or not supported. That trauma runs through your body and can run through your life, but that sense of not blaming can change it.
All right, I'm liking this thing. I want to ask you one step up then. Okay, so I was asking, okay, I realized I've screwed up my kids and I want to fix it. And you say, yes, it is possible by turning things around. Okay, now what about the person who, as an adult, or a parent now, an empty nester whose children are now adults, and they feel like they really screwed things up. How can they fix those is there any good word tweaks, like what happened to you? How bad did I screw up? Are there questions you can ask them like that? Or do you go the
Well,
same route?
I mean, basically, what you heard me say just before about that
Same thing.
questioning approach, that's one approach amongst a sea of issues in a family life, isn't it?
All right, so see, it'll work everywhere.
Yeah, and when you say the phrase "what if the parent feels" or "what if I as a parent feel," that's very much your understanding of potentially, or a parent might think, I've not been a great parent, or maybe I persisted in a marriage for the children and it didn't necessarily have that loving, nurturing nature because we didn't love each other, but we thought we'd stay together for the finances, for the security. But actually, it was a pretty horrible environment for those children. Did I do that wrong? It's always interesting to actually ask the children. If they're adult children, it's a really profound an impact. It's a really unusual situation to have your parents, especially aging parents as they're getting into their 70s, 80s or older, hopefully, to say, what was it like for you rearing me? What was it like parenting me? And it is such an unusual experience for parents to have their children ask them that. And sometimes in some of the work I might be doing when I'm helping people with addictions or psychosexual problems or other types of issues that really affect their day-to-day, it ruins their work, it affects their confidence, they're really not doing so well, but on the surface they're trying to look like everything's peachy. Just that sense of, could you get close to your parent and have a little look back about what it was like back then? Because it's safe, you see, because you're not criticizing them in the here and now, you're just saying, oh, I wonder what it was like for you. And it really draws family members together. It's really powerful because the child assumes that the parent didn't care for them, and the parent assumes that the child didn't notice. And of course, the child didn't know that there was debt, affairs, ill health, notifications about them losing their job, and all of the worries about mortgages. They didn't know that. But
Yeah.
so as you get to your parents' age, or you're perhaps lucky enough to be a parent yourself, you know there's that eye-opening moment where you suddenly think, "Oh, crikey, I empathise with my parent now because I didn't know what was going on."
I think becoming a parent was the best understanding for having a parent. Absolutely. That's when I realized and understood so much. And my things, what I did, to drive my parents crazy.
A real micro example of something that goes on inside the head of somebody who might have experienced some childhood difficulty, and they're an adult now, and they might have done things that are quite difficult. It might be somebody at work. Hands up if anyone's worked with anybody who's been quite bombastic or quite top down and authoritarian. Maybe they've been described with unpleasant words like a narcissist or a psychopath, things that aren't very nice to say, but at an informal level, it basically says that person might be difficult to work with. Internally, there's lots of things going on for that person. And yes, you might not have had any empathy because you've been at the fire end of the roaring effect. You might not want to even think about what they've been going through. But that doesn't come about. Children, when they're born, they're very innocent. They're very their neuroplasticity and the sense of their brain and the patterns are all very embryonic. They're nurtured into various different adults, as we know. So when you get to meet somebody at work or in a relationship who can't empathise, who cannot see your perspective, who might be potentially described as selfish, in a sexual situation, they might have their needs met, and then you don't really have any needs because their needs have been met. That sense of entitlement, that can be really difficult to be around. It's difficult if you're married to somebody. It's very difficult if you're working under somebody in that situation. We've all touched or been around people who might know somebody like that, if not directly. The internal experience that might be going on for that person is quite interesting. So if you imagine you say to that partner or that boss or that person who might be quite entitled, if you say, "I don't agree with you," or if you say, "You've got the wrong end of the stick, that's not what I said. You've twisted that. That's not really what I said." The internal experience for them is very different from what you expect it to be. The internal experience for them is shame. You are saying you've done something which is really quite challenging and it diminishes their self-esteem inside. And because it diminishes it down, that's really quite painful for somebody. So if someone thinks they have quite a bold personality and you're picking up on a flaw, or you're saying that you've been really quite cruel to that person, you've been not very generous, you've been really unkind, that is like an arrow to the heart. Even though it's just a few words you've said and you've been a bit honest, you've been a bit assertive, and that person's experience inside is a diminishing of the self-esteem that is so painful, they have to bring that self-esteem up at 100. That's when the put down comes out. That's when you would say that, or you can't speak to me like that because you're paid that amount, and stay in your lane. And in unpleasant situations, we know that can lead to arguments. It could lead to violence. And in the worst scenario, it could lead to a really lethal situation where you've diminished someone's self-esteem, not intentionally, but their sensitivity is so high, their self-esteem plummets. They have to resurrect it. It's too uncomfortable. They will not tolerate that discomfort. And the only way to resurrect it is to do something harsh, to do something to change that balance. And in extreme situations, we know that humiliation is one of the biggest drivers for some of the most serious offences in the whole world. So there's something about, we've got to think, could something be experienced inside that person's head that I'm really not thinking about? And just making sure that you don't hold your tongue, but you're as careful as you can be.
Maybe you came from a crappy family, but you want to make a good one. Give me a couple of little tips for the table to make your family, your kids, your spouse feel connected at the table, to feel. Let's end on a positive note, some positive things that we can do. Give me two tips or tools that we can use that are crucial. Maybe a feeling that we want to evoke out of the kids or whatever to make it a positive experience.
There's two really simple things here. There's rituals and there's noticing. And when I say rituals, that is a real primal, evolutionary, rich thing to keep all tribes and all small communities and all families quite stable. If you know there's a set pattern, as in a Sunday meal, or it's a Friday meal, or it's a birthday get together, and people move from the entire world to come to see mom or to see whoever it is, if there's a ritual and that becomes entrenched and it's pleasant and it has a sense of reinforcement, oh, really great for traveling 60 miles to come and see me, it means so much to me. That ritual becomes socially conditioned as a really positive thing within the family. And it could be a little thing. On a Thursday, we always listen to your sister tell us about what she did in her gym class. Everybody might be bored rigid, but that little girl has her window where she's telling everybody about her gym class. And that's a little ritual and it becomes something. So rituals is one thing. It's really easy to insert into your life. Sure, you can't do it every Thursday, but when you do that Thursday, it matters. And the other thing is noticing. There's something about if someone is shouting, someone is being perhaps a bit selfish, someone's being a bit greedy at the table. We're talking about around the table stuff here, aren't we? There's something about noticing and feeding back. Because we often say to children, don't do that or stop that. It's just easier to say. It takes fewer letters. We're tired sometimes, we're just cranky. But actually, if we say, don't do that because you're educating the young mind to learn, I don't do that because that upsets people. Or if I take the last slice of cake, grandma who isn't here this week won't get the final slice when she pops around tomorrow. It just helps. So that noticing, giving a bit of feedback encourages the younger, less socially aware children, but also the adult children, let's be honest, to just notice. Two things that I know that really work because the research says that and the families say that as well.
I love it. So everybody, there's a gift from Dr. Ashley in the chat. So make sure you take a look at 5 rarely shared brain secrets. I know there's probably definitely some secrets that can fix my brain on how to smash procrastination. So that's also a good thing, especially when it comes to making meals. Don't procrastinate. Start your meals in the morning. Okay, we'll come to that later when I stick my 2 cents in. But Dr. Ashley, thank you so much for being here and all your wonderful points and showing us. I know that I don't really want to bring up all the bad things in life that can happen when, a family isn't united and isn't connected and isn't noticing what people are doing, but it gives us another perspective so that we realize how very important the connections in our lives are. And I just like to say that a lot of it does begin at the table. It's not a cure-all, but it's a cure-a-lot. So, but nothing's a cure-all, but it is a great start. So,
and just a quick thank you to you, Dorina, because the reason I was interested in coming here is because this is not a common thing that people do, bringing that sense of togetherness and also related to food and family connection. So you might be, you've often been really modest and said this is at the beginning part of your developing this. You're doing fantastic. This is growing. It's a growth.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm gonna cry. I'm a real sap, I get very emotional about things, and I guess I wasn't used to getting compliments growing up. So when I get a compliment, it makes me cry happy. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Thanks for inviting me.
So you can fix my brain later. All right. So let's see who's next today. Let's check. Let's turn my page. Oh, Brent Strom, who I never can, that last name, Strom, Brent, my dear, where are you? There you are.
Hi, Dorina.
How you doing today?
So good. It's interesting. My wife is in the other room. She's heading out of town for something. And she goes, how's it going? I said, these people are so smart. They use such good big words that are just so helpful. I just love it. I'm really impressed with the people the last few days and even this morning and such. So maybe you're having me on to round out the curve. I don't have a lot of big words or any books or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy, but I'm just so delighted.
You're
And
more than a regular guy.
I echo what Dr. Ashley just said, talking about what you're doing, which feels like it's just the genesis of something that's really great. Wow. For this to be the first time, and I think I even emailed it to you, I'm just so impressed. For the first time to have it go this well, yeah, this is going to be something that you'll be doing time and time again because the people have responded. So thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thanks. Well, I met Brent because he was a coach at a course I took. He is an entrepreneur, a media strategist, let me tell you, a content creator. He's a pastor. Of course, that's the main reason I asked him here. Of course, I describe Brent, and you know what I'm going to tell you. I told this to Renee, and she agreed with me. I describe Brent as a big hug. He's like a hug. He is
I'll take it.
you're heartwarming and inspirational and smart. So that to me is wonderful. So, Brent is also a pastor, right?
Yeah, I used to be a full-time pastor. And so in 2003, I left full-time ministry and kind of hit the reset button on my life with my wife and our two sons. And because I just wasn't seeing my wife and I wasn't seeing my kids. And sometimes what happens, and not everybody is faith-based here, possibly, and that's totally cool with me. As a Christian, what happens sometimes in ministries is that you kind of start losing your identity of who you should be. And pastor, then husband and father, I got it flipped upside down. And I just wasn't seeing the people that I really loved in my life. And God was like, geez, I gave you these three treasures and you're just burying them. And so I sensed that God was calling me out of full-time ministry just to be a husband and to be a father. And so we moved to a place in Minnesota that we didn't know one soul and started all over from scratch. And it's the greatest thing that we ever did. Is it hard? Yeah. But it
Wow.
was really what we needed to do just to get our bearings straight. And so I still do ministry things. Like I'm preaching tomorrow, but we're supposed to have a snowstorm. So we'll see. We're supposed to have 8 inches of snow here. I
Oh,
hate
you're
it here.
kidding.
It's
I'm,
awful.
I'm
Anyway,
complaining about a little rain. Okay.
yes, I know. Don't you dare. And so, I do ministry things here and there, but mostly I speak on a variety of things, startup culture and business. And I'm a business coach, I'm a speaking coach, and I'm an entrepreneur, but mostly just a regular guy that loves God and loves people.
Well, you're an awesome guy. One of the things that I'm going to tie together what Dr. Ashley was just saying about rituals, and I often say that it's the traditions and the rituals from our heritage and our faith that bond our families. And maybe you want to expand a little bit on how faith can help us like just connect and slow down a little bit and when we're around the table. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, when I grew up in a home that the table was central to everything that we did. I grew up in a small home. I was youngest of five kids, incredible mom and dad. And regardless of what we were going to be eating, we just made sure we were going to be at the table. I think you mentioned yesterday or the day before, once in a while, you and your husband will break out the TV trays. And that was just like an incredible thing. If there's a big football game on or something, we got the TV trays. But generally, we just sat around the table, all seven of us. And we talked about things that mattered. We didn't just talk about sports. We didn't just talk about the weather. We talked about things of life. And so it was engineered in me right from the get-go just to hear stories of my siblings and my mom and dad. And we would talk about faith. What do you think? What do you believe? Why do you believe this? And we'd question things, and it was okay to question things. God thinks it's okay to question things. And so my parents really represented the heart of God really well there around that table. And because of that, we did it in our home as well. My wife grew up in the same kind of home. And so then when we had our two sons, we sat around the table every single meal. And we did a thing we'd always say, what was a high point? What was a low point? So everybody around the table, all four of us had to give a high point and a low point of our day. So something that didn't go very well, or something that's bugging you, or something that's hard. And then we'd end it with something that went really well today. And I'm sure the kids, when they were, 12 and 14, thought, not this again. But I bet they're going to be doing something similar now with their kids because they realize we started talking about things that mattered, that gave you peace of mind, and it gave you confidence, and it gave you trust. And so, really, the faith factor, when we brought it to the table, we just talked about things that mattered. So, if you had something unsettled in your mind or heart or spirit, you had freedom to be able to share it around the table. And that's what I grew up in. And in our home, in my family, and because of this kind of grace that we had in our family, my mom and dad set the tone really well. All my friends would come to our house. I would never go to other people's houses because they all wanted to be at our home. And we just had a really simple home, a small home. Most of my friends had these gigantic homes and fancy televisions and gadgets and everything, and they didn't want to be there. They wanted to be at our house. Why? Because they knew they'd sit at a table and they would hear stories, and then my parents would ask them to share a story, and then they got on the outside what was happening on their inside, and it was cathartic for them. And I think they thought, I never get this at my house. Nobody listens to my story. We don't sit around the table. We always are on the move somewhere. But at the Strummy home, when we sit at Brent's place, we just all are in the same room, laughing and crying and hearing stories. And so we would talk about things that really mattered even in their life. And I just don't think that happens very often anymore. And so what you're trying to do is really important, because when people come to our house now, there's a bunch of rooms we could go in, but we all just go to the kitchen and sit around the table or stand around the table and tell stories.
Yeah,
So
that was
maybe
like
that was too long of an answer, but I just want to let
no.
you know that was kind of what I grew up with and how it was and how we're doing it as well now.
No, I think that's a great answer, and then that's not too long. And we did that with our kids. Our kids, their friends were always my kids wanted to go someplace, like you say, and they're like, no, no, no. All the kids wanted to come to our house. Partially for the food, I think, but the food was always on the table, so they did, come in and sit down and we would talk with them, because I've always enjoyed talking with the kids and giving them that time and that energy, when I know that they didn't do it at their house, and they would say so. And of course, a lot of only children used to like to come to our house because there was so much commotion and they loved all the excitement, as it was a different story. You speak about purpose-driven life. So how does this, I wrote this down because I wanted to get it right. How does inspiration turn into real life impact at the dinner table? But also not just at the dinner table in homes, but within communities or in a business, because I know you do a lot of business coaching too. How does that dinner table then and these same things translate over there?
Every single day I wake up and I think through my day. I don't just haphazardly walk into my day. And maybe I'll sound like I'm over the top on certain things, but there are a lot of things in life that I wasn't getting right. And so I'm not trying to make up for lost time. I just want to live every single day intentionally. So every single day I say the exact same thing. I wake up, my feet hit the ground. I say, God, these are your feet. Take these feet to places that I would never venture on my own. God, these are your hands. Help me give encouragement and hope and healing to people that maybe need it today. And then I venture off, and then God leads me places. And so wherever I go, I love this saying, and I use it all the time. It says this: you've never locked eyes with someone who doesn't matter to God. So even this morning, when I went to the gas station, I had a great little conversation with the young woman behind at the cash register. We just talked about life, and we talked about business, and we talked about her family, and nobody was behind us. So I just took advantage of the opportunity I had with her. And so whether it's business coaching, whatever it might be, I keep asking people, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your life to be like? What do you want your week to be like? What do you want your day? What do you want your hour to be like? So I just try to nail it down. What do they really want? And a lot of people never get the chance to actually explain their desires and their hopes and their dreams because we're rushing around so much. And so part of that dinner table conversation where we'd look at our kids, or I'd look at my siblings, and we would talk about what really matters in life and what they're hoping to get out of this life. I do that wherever I go, no matter who it is. And nobody's really bashful about it. It might feel like to a couple other people like Jeepers, Brent went right into a deep conversation with this stranger. If it's on a bus or a plane ride, every plane I'm on, I'm always having great conversations with people. I just love people. I just think they're just incredible.
You just made me feel so good, because I'm a crazy talk to stranger people too. And everybody in my family, they think I'm loony, but I think you're awesome. So therefore, I guess I'm not doing something so terrible. I love
No,
that. I love having a conversation with somebody. I love trying to make somebody's day. I love, I'm goofy. So I love, if I see a woman wearing a pair of shoes that I like, I'm complimenting them. I compliment shoes all the time. It's my thing. But you know what, that little moment, oh, I like your shoes. Even something as simple as that lift oh, she noticed me. It's like somebody noticing, especially a woman noticing another woman, because usually we're so competitive. But I'm not. I love to give that compliment or that little moment of conversation. Like you say, I'll talk to the person giving me the coffee from behind the counter, or whatever, because I don't know. I just feel I feel like constantly connected. I feel like I am already connected, so I just got to open up the lines so that they can be connected too. It's something I feel strongly about. So thank you for validating that for me.
Of
But
course.
it's beautiful. It is. You know what? People talk to people because, I mentioned it yesterday, I think, that, neighbors who don't know each other. Now that's a sin to me. That is a
Mhm.
royal sin. It's not community, it's not neighborly, it's not connected. And we do need to connect. What do you, so you already just, you've just kind of explained some of your daily habits and rituals that you do. I love your little morning thing, take my feet and take my hands and do with them. I really like that. What about as being, because I know you're a grandfather now too, right?
I am.
How
Yes,
many, how many?
I have three granddaughters and they're fabulous. I mean, we love our kids, but we really love our granddaughters.
I'm my first two grandchildren are coming now in April. They're going to both my two of my kids, their wives are my two sons. Two of my sons are going to be dads now in April, and I'm so excited because that's the first one. So woohoo, I'm going to be a nonna.
Good for
But
you.
you know, what lessons have you learned about these connection like across generations now? Because now that you're a grandfather and you've got the grandchildren sometimes maybe at your table, how do you
Mhm.
find the difference in connecting with them and sharing with them? Do you just treat them the same way you treated your kids, or is there a whole nother level there?
We treat them just about the same way we treated our kids. All we did is lock eyes with them, right? We just looked in their eyes and we were interested in their life. And so I'm interested in my granddaughter's day. And so when we sit around the dinner table, I asked Taya, hey, what was your day like today, Taya? Tell me what was a good thing today and what was a hard thing today, kind of like high point, low point. And
Right.
she'll just start explaining it and such. And then I'll say, hey, what's your favorite color? I can't remember. And then she'll tell me her favorite color. Then I'll say, Nora, what book are you reading right now? And then she'll tell me. So I'm just interested in their life.
How
And
old are they?
they are 10, 7, and 3. And so
Wow.
what they would probably remember about me, if something happened to me and I was gone, they'd probably say, most of our good conversations took place at the dinner table with us. That's just what they would say because we just sit at our table and tell stories. And here's a beautiful thing. Our son, so we have two sons, both married. One's 32 and one's 30. So our 32-year-old was just at his place the other day and they remodeled their home. And really, what they decided to do was to remodel their kitchen and dining area so that more people could come in and be at their table. So, all the money they spent was just about being at the table. So, in their kitchen, which is a sizable kitchen, they put in this beautiful island that allows people to sit around or stand around. And then you go outside of the kitchen and there's this big dining room with this massive table, and everything in that home is centered around the table. So
Yeah.
the good news for me and my wife was like, they got that part right at least. At least we were able to hand that down to them that the table's important. So
That was my next question was you raised your kids this way and are you seeing them do the same thing?
they
So
are. They're
that's
just doing it. And so I'm so happy about that. And so their kids, when their kids think through, my word, a lot of people want to remodel their kitchen or get a man cave or do whatever it might be. My parents decided we want a bigger table and a better environment for people to come and tell stories. That's what they'll do as well too. And so it'll just be generational all the way through. And that's really what we want. The table
I
matters.
I think the generational thing is great because if we can bring our own kids to the table and they have a good experience there, there's a greater chance that they're going to continue the same routine, the same tradition, the same rituals. So, and like I said, tradition and ritual to me are so important. That it's sometimes like okay, so I'm Italian Catholic. We have foods that are associated with every saint. So, for St. Joseph Day, we make zeppoli, and for St. Anthony, we make these rolls, and there's a specific food. We have a specific kind of pasta we make for Palm Sunday. So it always revolves about bringing us back to the table. So I
Mm.
think that traditions and rituals in your home, and for people who aren't lucky enough to be Italian like me, find your own heritage, bring your own traditions to your table because inevitably a lot of us have traditions and foods that are related to something of our heritage and our faith. And so these are things that, kind of create questions at the table, like, why are we having this food today? Well,
Mm.
because of Saint Joseph, and well, who was that? And we start a conversation, and well, that was Jesus' earthly father. So we get a conversation about faith with it just being curiosity, if that's the case, so I mean, my kids know, but this is how things go. And I love the fact that you've done this, and you see with your perspective and talking about how it's continued across the generation. I love it.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's interesting. You just brought up Palm Sunday as we head toward Easter in the Christian faith. You know, you think of the Last Supper. I mean, Jesus didn't have like the last pickleball tournament. He didn't have the last walk by the ocean. He didn't have the last shopping extravaganza. He had the Last Supper. And
Yeah.
there's a reason he had the supper because they all just sat around and told stories and talked about things that really mattered. When you and I met, it was in Milwaukee, right? I believe it
Yeah.
was in Milwaukee. And I'm a speaking coach, so I help people tell their story better as far as their business or whatever it might be. And everybody has a story to tell. And I just think what happens oftentimes is that we just don't tell enough stories. I used to go to deer camp with my brothers and my dad and all my uncles and such, and we just hunt deer, but we really didn't care about hunting deer. We just wanted to hear stories of one another, and we just loved that. It was just a beautiful ritual that we have every single year. We just go up to a deer camp in the woods and tell stories. It's so beautiful. And my wife and I, every single Friday night, we've done this for 24 years now. I can count on one hand the number of Friday nights that we have missed. So we had it last night. So we have date night every single Friday night. And one of the reasons we have date night, and we've had it for all these years, is because days go fast, weeks go into months, months go into years. It goes so fast. So it's a chance for us to just stop and reflect and reminisce on the week that was and what we're looking forward to. And we just talk about it. So we don't just watch a movie. So last night, for example, we went down to our bar that we have down in our lower level and we did a puzzle together, not next to each other, but across from one another. And there's a reason we did it across from one another. Well, first of all, my wife thought I could just serve her drinks then, but because I get to look in her eyes and she gets to look in my eyes as we do the puzzle. It's the same thing with Jesus and his disciples. He wanted to look them in the eye and just talk about what really matters in this life. And so they had the Last Supper. So you brought up Palm Sunday. I thought I'm just going to slide that in there and sneak that in.
I love it. It definitely, I tell people when I'm encouraging people, like with relationships, you need to have a date night, like you're saying, once a week. And one time, years and years ago, when we had all the kids and we were kind of going crazy, and I had said something like, we need our once a week date night again or whatever. And he said, well, why don't we try for every other week? And I said, no, because every other week, if you miss one, because sometimes you do because of life or whatever. If you miss one, then it's a whole month until your next date night, between them. But if you plan for every week and you miss one, you still got 3 that month. So plan. And also, I always said the same thing, do something where you're facing each other. Maybe once in a blue moon, you're going to hit a movie, but then go out to dinner and talk about the movie. It gives you, food for fodder. It gives you content. I always call it creating content for conversation, the things that you go and do. So you either got to do something facing each other or go do an activity that gives you, something to talk about later. It's always a nice thing to have, so create content, as we all know those terms these days in the social media business. So anyway, well, thank you immensely for sharing these things with us, because it's very, very important. Everybody has some faith, and like you said at the beginning, not everybody is Christian or Catholic, but I think everybody should follow their faith and find your way. So it's very important. Brent also has a really awesome, if anybody has a business and wants, you still have your weekly.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yep, 5 words in every single Thursday. Yeah, at noon Central Time. I can drop some information in the chat
Would
if
you
you'd want me
please? Because
to.
I don't
Just
think you didn't
if
send it to me, so just
if
throw it in
people
the
have
chat.
questions or you need more information or whatever, or if you just want to dive a little bit further into something, I'm happy to do that. But here is some information that you can have. I just love this conference. You know what's interesting? Tomorrow at our church, just so you know, this will be a good exclamation point. At our church tomorrow, so we have a worship service, and after the worship service, everybody gathers we call it the gathering space, And it's just a bunch of round tables, and everybody stays for nearly an hour after church, just telling stories and talking, and everything is around food. It's so fun. It's just an amazing church. I love being a part of it. You would be great at that church. You'd
All
think,
right,
come
I'll
on, let's
come.
get the service over with, for crying out loud. This priest is going too long, this pastor. Yeah,
Let's go eat.
let's get the food. So that's what happens every single Sunday, even at our church. We treat it as a family, and I just love that part of it.
Awesome. I love it.
So
Well,
thank
thank
you
you.
very
And now
much.
I know how to properly pronounce your name that you said it, Strummy.
Yeah,
Strummy.
that's okay. Yeah, I've been called much worse, so I'm okay
Well,
with
you know,
that.
you know what? I've always just seen it. I've actually never said it, and I never heard you say it, and I don't know why I didn't even think to ask. So I apologize.
No,
Yeah, 'cause
well,
I'm really big on names. I think names are important. Always get people's names right because it's the one thing that's 100% theirs. And if you want to
mm,
respect somebody and show someone that you really care and that you're listening when you meet them, if you didn't catch their name or you're not sure how they pronounced it, ask them to repeat. I'm notorious for asking people to repeat their name. Wait a minute, can you spell that? If it's like maybe another ethnic name or something, spell that. How do you pronounce it? I will take a moment and actually make sure I've got their name right because I feel like that is the number one first mode of respect I can give them when I meet them. So
no,
do that because I'm not Doreen, I'm Dorina.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you
So
honor people really well. So thank you for honoring all the people that have been on the last 3 days. What a joy to be able to just speak and share the screen with such incredible people. Thanks for the comments that I'm seeing on my chat right now. And yeah, love all of you. Thank you for being a
thank
part
you,
of
Brent.
this. Yeah, thank you,
I'll talk to you
Dorina.
soon.
All right,
All
bye-bye.
right. Ciao, ciao. Well, we're going to keep going right along because, you know, I'm having so much fun chatting and the 3 days this is the first time I've done this, but I'm getting better and better at this, I think. So apologize to people from day one for me not being as good as I am now because, I just got to try a few times and I got it. Okay. So to now we have Isla Redden, who is, I think, here already, right? Isla here? Okay. Isla is going to talk to us about talking to our teens. She has a little different. We heard from Coach M the other day, and I love having multiple voices on similar topics because we can learn so much from so many different people, even if they're talking about the same thing. So, hi, Isla.
Hey, Dorina, can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely, wonderful.
Perfect, perfect, good.
So Isla is she is a speaker and a guide for parents of teenagers, and so talks a lot about transforming the chaos of the teen years. So we're gonna go right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about like where you are and what exactly you do for people and how.
Okay, so a little backstory to start,
Yes,
if I may.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
so I'm actually speaking to you from Austin, Texas. My accent will tell you that I was not born and raised in Texas. I'm actually from Northern Ireland originally. And so that's sort of an important component of my story, just because growing up in an environment that was very, very different to the one that I moved into and that my kids grew up in. My kids were born and raised in California. So two extraordinarily different cultures there. And my story is sort of started with when my oldest was 8 years old, was in third grade, and he's now an adult with his own kids. I have two little grandsons, and he was having difficulties in school. He was bored. He and I were arguing over homework, and when you argue with an 8-year-old over homework, you at one point you kind of realize this is sheer insanity. And so that insanity led me to what's going on at school? Why am I having these issues? And just took me down this path that I'm still on today, that is, how do we learn? How do we process our information? How are we uniquely gifted and talented? And how do we honor those aspects of each individual that are just kind of so rich and brilliant, and especially if it doesn't fit into the model of the world that everybody else is trying to push us into. So that was my oldest son. And my younger boy kind of came along 5 years later. And his journey was, for me, extremely challenging when he was a teenager. A lot of emotional challenges. He was very bullied at school, and I didn't know how to help him. But that experience of him in the teenage years and my lack of ability to really support him is what informed in so many ways what I do today. And today, my goal is to help parents, caregivers, any adult that is in a teenager's life really understand that these kids, this process of adolescence is like caterpillar to butterfly. In the cocoon, everything disintegrates and it builds back together again. And the parent that you are 0 to 10 does not work to be that parent cannot continue through those adolescent years into adulthood. You have to become a different parent. I didn't know or understand that. I learned it all later when my kids were grown, but that's what I now feel so passionate about giving to other parents, is their understanding of what we now know about what's happening in the brain, how we know that we need to parent differently, and walk alongside our children into adulthood.
So I having 6 kids, you're always for many years I was always parenting a small child. So sometimes it's hard to transition to treat this one like a big kid and this one like a little kid. It's hard. It's definitely hard.
Yes, and I honor that journey in you, Dorina, because I had 2, 5 years apart. And so it was probably a heck of a lot easier for me to realize when I was in serious trouble than it probably was for you, because for every child at every point along the way, you're just juggling it all. I had
every other year. So
I had the opportunity, if I look back at it like that, to kind of realize, oh my God, I am in so much trouble. And I don't know where I know where I was. I know it's not working, but I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah. You talk about going beyond behavior. What are some of the most common misinterpretations parents will make about teen behavior, for example? Because you focus mostly on the teens, don't you?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yes. The parent-teen relationships. The biggest challenge that I see is one of expectation. Parents' expectation of their children in the teenage years. What we know today that we didn't know 15 years ago is that the brain is going through so much transformation, and that aspect of being under construction means that those things that we as parents expect our kids to be able to do, they absolutely can't, because they don't have the brain capacity. It's not developed sufficiently for the kids to be in a position to respond appropriately to what we think the expectations are of appropriate behavior, emotional regulation, organization, understanding of consequences, risk-taking, all of these aspects that make us completely and utterly nuts as parents. We expect that it's just, this is a bigger version of the child, but this bigger version has to have the capacity to have an adult thinking behind what they're doing, and they absolutely can't. So what we used to say was, we now have this data that says the brain is not actually completely finished developing until age 30. It's the connections that is what makes this front part, the planning part of the brain, be able to do that emotional regulation and that planning and that executive function there. But it's not complete until 30. So at 16, what's going on there is that we have what we call asynchronous development. The development is not, everything isn't happening at the same time. What is happening in those mid-teenage years is the emotional brain is way more developed than the logical brain. So when your kid is having an absolute fit about their sandwich, or they're, going to bed, or whatever is the issue of the moment, and it feels so dramatic for the child, it truly is dramatic for the child, because we never again go through this same period. Once the adult shows up and the brain is all connected, everything is, the logical is there, therefore the emotional regulation is there, but it is not there in the teenage years. So the biggest thing that I coach and teach and help parents be able to work with is, when you see something that you don't like, take a breath and think to yourself, is this something that is developmental? And therefore, I need to be the coach, the mentor, the guide through this? Or is this something that I know that they have the capacity for, and therefore I need to be leading in a different way?
I jokingly say I was at the high school. My kids were every other year, and I was at the high school for 15 years. I was a parent at our local high school, 15 years running. And when I think back, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of teen years that I had to live through. And I'm going to give my pat on the back. We're all still standing. But okay, when teens, like, they kind of, sometimes you say something and you didn't even say anything. Sometimes, you're walking on eggshells. Like, you really feel like you didn't say anything that would irk them, but you did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they kind of shut down. So now we're at dinner. How can you break through the shutdown moments when that's their, I guess in a way, that's their, like, their stronghold? They're like, I'm in charge. I'm not gonna talk, How can we respond in ways that maybe we can invite conversation instead of continuing a conflict?
Brilliant question. And when, as you say, that can seem to come out of the clear blue, like, I didn't do anything. I mean, you're not guilty. You're trying to figure out, what did I say? What could I possibly have said that has generated this response? I think that the first thing that's most important is remember that it's not you. There's something else going on, number one. And where I love what you're doing and really promoting the table is, today, kids, we don't sit down to eat often enough, and often at all. I mean, it really is something that is missed. And as a result of that, we haven't built into the dinner table, or the ritual of eating, this idea that we want everybody to show up as themselves. It's not a place to interrogate. It's not a place of judgment. It's a place of welcome. It's a place of celebration. It's relaxing. It's a place where we really want to encourage that everybody can show up as their best selves, or if they're going through something really bad and tricky, that they can show up knowing that they can talk about that. But not, I think we miss so many opportunities, because as parents, we get so upset with our kids, and we're seeing behavior that we don't like, and we keep asking this question, why did you do that? Or we're constantly badgering them to get the answers that we want. And therefore, they feel like they have no control. By ignoring us, they're taking control. They're not giving us what we want.
So when somebody, like, when they're quiet like that, when they're being silent and they're giving you the silent treatment and not responding to you, should you let them have that moment of control and just pretend it's not there? Or is there something that you can do to break through it in a positive way?
So I think in every situation, the parent is the one that is going to figure out. Remember that we are the role models, that our kids watch every single thing we're doing all the time. It doesn't matter what age they are, they're watching it all. So if we are willing to have our kid at the table and just be silent in whatever's going on for them, and it's okay, and that we just want them to be with us, then they will be. And we don't need to make it be some kind of talkative situation. We need to just honor their silence and their, they've maybe gone through a really, really tough day. They're maybe absolutely exhausted, fried, wasted. The social emotional toll for a teenager in the school setting is huge. They're exhausted at the end of the day. So I think that one of the things that I try to help parents see is, imagine that you're the coach and this is your team is at the table, and this is one of the athletes. You're going to encourage that individual to just be who they need to be in the moment, and not try. If you correct all the time, you're never ever going to have a connection. So you always want to connect before you correct. So for me, I think that kids are going through some really, really tough times. A lot of let them be, and encourage the environment to be, let them be, but let them be in community with us. It's safe to just sit with us and not say a word.
I've been listening to a couple of different, a lot of people that we've had now are talking about connections in general, and sometimes it's about our own table, our own family at the table. How much, if we're one of those parents, say, that is welcoming to people outside outside of our home, outside of our family, and your kids' friends per se, how much influence does another parent have on a kid that maybe doesn't have this same thing at home?
Massive. In my experience, huge. And again, because they're watching everything. They're not going to say anything necessarily, but they're watching. They know safe spaces. And kids are constantly looking for a safe space and an affirmation of who they are. And often just the very fact that, Johnny happens to be in the house, and you say, we join us for dinner if your mom's not expecting you home, join us for dinner. Or if you think that she hasn't made dinner yet, just come and have dinner with us. That kind of welcome for our kids is a gift beyond anything you could ever give them. You could never give anything more than your attention.
So that's the gift for your own kids to see what you're doing, inviting others in, and it's a gift for that other kid.
100%. 100%.
Absolutely. I love that. I loved having other kids at my table. And I think that my kids realized that, because eventually when they started, going over to other people's houses, they're like, Mom, they don't do this. Mom, they don't do that. And it was all of our traditions, our rituals, our recipes, our way of sitting at the table. There was a lot of comparison. And, so, and to this day, my kids all know how to cook. And I jokingly say that it's a good thing I'm a good cook, because at least they call me, Ma, how do you make this? Ma, how do you make that? What's in that recipe again? I can't remember. So at least I gave them an excuse to call me as adults. So it makes me happy. But
I'll tell you a funny story like that, because, I said about being kind of growing up in the British system. So one of the things that my mother believed was that I have to have the table. I'm one of three girls. We have to have the table manners that we would be okay if we had to eat with the Queen. So that was the way we were raised. So if we're sitting at the table, it was that how you eat was such an important deal for my mom. And that's probably a generational thing, but it really was important. So my kids grew up using a knife and fork, and they grew up being able to eat. They grew up knowing how to set a table. They grew up with all of that. So it was always kind of this running joke of it actually, I know that, they went and anywhere else and nobody was eating the way that we eat or the way that I eat, which was fine, but it gave them something that was an important piece of their tradition. That was a piece of family tradition. When they were eating with their grandparents, they were always eating the same way. So little things you don't even know that you're doing, but become important and special and unique. And so for the kids, for my friends' kids, when they would come over, it would always be like, what is this? I understand knife and fork at the table, but I cut with my knife and I transfer my fork to my right hand and I eat with my fork. What is this eating with a knife and fork at the same time? So it would become a huge topic of conversation that we could tell stories with, right? That's how I was raised. That's because my mother wanted me to be able to dine with the Queen if I ever got the invitation.
Well, and it's funny because you know, the English doctor who is here watching, of course, says lovely idea laying the table for the Queen. You know, we don't have a queen in the States, and we don't have one here in Italy, but I get it. And I think it's very cool. I think it's a lovely story. If parents could take one important thing from you, like what's the most important thing you could stress to a parent right now, especially, let's say, you know, a parent maybe even who's struggling, you know, what would you hope it is?
To listen, to really, really listen to their child. And we have completely forgotten what it takes to listen to anybody else. We ask a question and we already have decided how we're going to respond to whatever answer we get. There's so much, we don't give kids enough time to do a reflection when we ask a question. We don't ask open-ended questions that allow them to give us back more material than a yes and no. And in that reflection, if we give them enough time, there's so much more material that we can see. We can understand where they are emotionally because we're watching the body language. We're waiting for how they want to process the information. Just becoming what, you know, the psychological term being an active listener, but that truly is being incredibly patient and letting your child know that whatever they say is incredibly valuable to you. And that as one thing can change so many other things.
Yeah. I think patience is definitely, you know, I don't think anybody's born with patience. I think it's something you got to learn, you got to practice and practice and practice. And like I shared the other day, you know, my little mantra to myself to, you know, keep quiet and listen and digest what is said to me, because we often are already ready to say what we want to say next before we even finish listening to what is being said to us. And then sometimes that answer isn't the right answer to what they're saying because they didn't finish their thought and it might be going in a different direction than we thought. So then we're already answering them and it's not right because then we didn't really hear them. And so, you know, my just shut up, Darina mantra, you know, it helped me. You know, my God, I always, yeah, I don't know if you were here and heard me say that, but I am stubborn and I am strong-willed. And so I needed to be strong-willed with myself and tell myself to shut up, not just count to 10. You know, it wasn't good enough for me. So, you know, it's definitely, I know that patience is something that if everybody just takes a moment and tries that, you know, like one of the things I really encourage people, I did it myself. Take a vow of silence, even just for one day. Don't talk. Tell the family you're not going to talk and just listen. And wow, you realize how many times you were getting ready to jump in, but you're not because you already decided you're not speaking. And it was I did it for 4 days. And I tell you, it was the best lesson for me to stop, wait, and then, you know, afterwards. And interesting thing, the kids actually listened to me better when I wasn't talking because all I did was get their attention and point to the dish on the table and point to the sink. And they couldn't pretend they didn't hear me because they saw me. You know how it is. They avert their eyes and then they couldn't pretend they didn't hear you. So it was actually a good lesson on that. But it did really get me to realize that you have to stop and wait because whether it's something that upsets you, wait. And if it
Yes.
still bothers you tomorrow, you can say it calmly and without the initial anger or sadness or whatever it hurt that that started with. You wait a day, and what a difference that makes too. So thank you. So listen and be patient. So we'll make
Yes.
it all one
Yes.
thing.
Yes. And I think that with one of the things that we don't pay enough attention to is this aspect of reflection. And every one of us processes our information differently. And for our kids, giving them the opportunity to have a longer period of time to think about something will allow them to come up with other ideas. So don't demand the answer to a question immediately. If you're trying to get some information or some feedback, if your child is not ready for it, just set up an appointment for the following day. I see that that it might help you to just have some time to think about this. Like, I'm a huge reflector, me personally anyway. I'm a huge reflector, and I come up with new ideas because I've had time to mull something over. Give our kids the grace to go away and think about something and then bring it back to us the following day. Don't demand that we need something immediately.
So I guess answer me is not the right answer.
Exactly. For example, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Isla has a gift in the chat, 10 reasons why there's conflict with your teen, and I will bet you $1,000,000. Oh, it's a workbook too, which is even better because it gives you something to do and work on. But a lot of these things that we talk about are good about relationships with everybody. We focus on kids,
Yes.
or we focus on teens, or we focus on husbands and wives, but the reality of it is, when you learn how to properly communicate, when you learn how to listen and be patient, the important thing is that helps you with every relationship in your life. And so, I encourage everybody, whether you have a teen or not, check it out, because I bet you it will help you with some other aspect of your life as well.
Yes,
Isla,
you're so right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much for this wonderful information and your dedication to doing better. Isla's a great example. You said you learned a lot of this stuff after. And
Yes.
maybe we don't, maybe we, like what I was saying before, maybe we screw it up with the kids in the beginning, but we can always fix things. We can always change things. Life is fluid and relationships are fluid. And if we do things right, we can make things better. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I love what you're doing, and I love the message. I think it's so very important, and the more families we can get to the table without an agenda other than just being together, the better.
Absolutely. That is just yes, back to the table. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Isla.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Wow, everybody. I've got goosebumps all day long, because these days have been, yes, this is a dream of mine. It is something that finally came to me and became clear a few years back. And when I realized what it was I was supposed to be doing, I was no longer questioning what I was supposed to be doing. And I am supposed to help people remember that the table is the center of our lives. And no, I'm not crazy. I don't think it's going to solve every problem in your life, but it will help a lot. And I mean a lot, because I've seen it. I've seen it. I'm going to take a minute and share with you guys a little story of my own. Um, you know, Everybody's got a story, as I think we've laid that foundation already. Everybody knows that. Everybody has a story. Nobody has a perfect life. And I come off as happy, cheerful, lovey. Me and my husband, we're wonderful, all this kind of stuff. But we've been through our crap too, as he now calls it, our dark time. We had a tragedy in our own family almost 20 years ago. And we lost his sister to suicide. And it slowly, the grief and the depression that ensued slowly eroded our family, our relationship. And he was typical guy, more quiet, more withdrawn, and inside anger, and it was grief, and it was a form of depression. But you guys don't get depressed, because that's a sign of weakness. So we just get angry. And me, I'm a typical Italian mama who I was ranting, raving, lunatic, crazy woman, depressed. So I was the one that was more outwardly offensive, so we ended up separating. And me and my favorite person in the world, next to my daughter, I don't know who's hearing this, but anyway, and my kids. But no, we separated. For 3 years. We separated. It was one of the most traumatic things in my life. Probably not, if not the most traumatic thing in my life. And what ended up happening as we were trying to work through this life of separate, apart, because our family still was very important to both of us, he came home every Sunday for dinner. And so because we had always done this, it wasn't something that I started doing just to try to pull him home, It was a routine, a ritual, a tradition in our home that we always sat down to dinner. So Sunday dinner was easy because he wasn't at work and all that. And so he came to the house every Sunday for dinner, and we had a piece of normal. And looking back on that time, that table was a lifeline for us that helped us come back together, because every Sunday it was a little piece of normal for us instead of all the crazy that was in our heads, in our lives, all the other sadness. It was a little bit of joy because we were trying to be normal and happy and joyful for the kids. And so, after 3 years, he came home. And we continued, and to this day, now it's just the two of us here. But we have, obviously we're going to see the kids soon, and we spend as much time with them as we can. But we have the best time now, and we laugh so much more and all that. But it all, I really credit a big piece, aside from my Italian woman stubbornness, to hold out and wait. I knew that, I knew deep inside everything would be okay in the end, but it took a long time. But that table held us. That table is a lifeline. And so that is one of the pieces why I feel so strongly about the connections at the table, because those connections kept us together. And so, I share that story. It's a hard story to share, and it took me a lot of years to be able to share it, but it is an important story because it shows that the depth of connection and how important it is. So husband and wife, kids, whatever, but we are all here. And one of my sons even told me one time, he said, you showed me, because I was always, from day one, I was worried how this was going to affect my kids. And one of my sons showed me, he said, you showed me anything's possible. And just saying that makes me emotional. So excuse me for a second. I remember that, but after when he got married, he told me that I showed him that anything is possible. And so, they all do the same thing. They all know how to cook. They all know how to connect. They all are talkers with their wives, my sons, the ones that are married, and they have great relationships because they learned how to communicate. So I love it. And so on that note, I think my next guest is here. Is Elaine here?
I am here. Yes, I am.
There you are. Hi, Elaine.
Here I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
I need to have a sip of water because I just worked myself up there sharing my story, but
Hey, I'm drying my eyes right now.
what's that?
I'm drying my eyes right now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I just had a Niagara Falls in my office from my eyes. That was a really good story, very real. Thanks for keeping it real and being so vulnerable. And now we can all connect like why this event is happening and why it's the table that you're talking about has
Yep.
a direct impact in your life.
Thanks. I spent a lot of time making that story up. No, I'm just kidding.
Now let's introduce Elaine.
Good. I needed to laugh to get my emotions in a different direction now. So Elaine, I'm sorry. Let me get my stuff together here. Elaine is gosh, she's a million things. She's an entrepreneur and a health mentor and a resilience expert. She deals with a lot of things because she dealt with things in her own life. So before I even describe it, because like I've said before, you can describe it better, but Elaine, would you share with us your story? And where are you here today? You are in Portugal, right?
I'm in Portugal in the Algarve, but obviously from England, as you can hear from my accent. So yes, I've got all sorts of strings to my story, so to speak. So it depends upon what the storyline is. But I've been very humbled by listening to the other speakers today and yesterday. I didn't get on the first day, but today and yesterday for sure. I didn't have a table. I didn't have a dinner table, and I have no recollection ever, and I didn't know this until I've been kind of challenged by listening to some of the speakers. I don't have a recollection of my father ever being at the dinner table, or even my mother. I only recollect my brother and I sitting there being told, if you don't eat your greens, you're not going to leave the table. So it was like a purgatory situation. It wasn't a happy situation at all. Where my table was with my family was every now and then when my dad was available. He was a police inspector, so he was always out there helping everybody else. But we didn't really see much of him. He was also a sports person, and cricket actually killed him, which is another story altogether. So my table was the card table. And I've been reflecting as some of the speakers have been saying what their wonderful times were, and I didn't have any of that, and I didn't even know. It's a complete revelation to me. I didn't have those situations. Having said that, is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? It's certainly made who I am today. It's forged who I am with the resilience and all the rest of it. I've been married 3 times, and as I've been driving back listening to all the last 2 speakers. I've been playing pickleball this afternoon, which is my community now. That's kind of my table, the friendships that I have with all these different things that I do. I've been thinking, what could I have done better? Going back. I've had 3 husbands, and I've never tried hard enough. I should have tried harder. And had we communicated, that would have been a different story. I would have been a different person, I guess, now to who I am now. But over the years, we can't live our life in hindsight. We live in what we know, when we know, how we experience, what our intuition, etc., is. So over the years, I've gravitated into a nutritional health consultant, but from a perspective of behaviour. So I can look at somebody's behaviour pattern, and I can tell you what they're likely to be ill with, what their symptoms are. And I've got the wherewithal to show them how to get better. But that wasn't always the case. I've run law firms, I've managed a band, I've been a policewoman, I've done all kinds of things. I've kind of been lost, really. But in all the lostness, I've now found who I am.
We're going to have to get you're going to have to come over here to Italy and sit at my table.
You're up the road, aren't you? I'm
not
down
very
in the
far.
Algarve.
You can get in the
You're a
car
hop
and
and a
get over
skip.
here.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So now you're talking about behavior. So you're talking about, and you've been through your own health issues, correct?
I have, yes. 10 years. I'm celebrating 10 years cancer-free. I've had a bit of skin cancer here and there, which I've dealt with myself. It's no big deal. People think it's a huge problem, but it's not a big deal when you know kind of what to do. But I've had 3 different versions of the cancer, and 10 years ago I was given less than a year to live with stage 4 cancer. And each of the cancers that I've had, I've dealt with differently according to my knowledge, my training, my intuition, etc., etc. So yeah, I'm 10 years free of stage 4 cancer.
Oh,
So I've
congratulations.
got a lot to say about health and well-being and how it helps people to understand what their behaviours are and how their behaviours are causing their health problems. But when you know that, how you can fix it. So none of it is rocket science. It's all, pretty much common sense, but we're not taught this stuff.
How does surviving all these cancers, how does that like shape how you now view stress and like not living in authentically, like you talk about.
Yeah.
How
So
does that change things, and how does that help you with your health journey? Because, I'm just going to pop back real quick to the Rosetta effect. The Rosetta, Pennsylvania story was that the doctor serving the town told another doctor nobody had any heart disease and a lot of other ailments as well. And they attributed it not as much to their diet, although we all know they were eating their fruits and vegetables from their gardens, as well as all the fatty meats and cheeses and all that. But they said that those connections and the community was a big part of their health and longevity. So is that kind of living authentically?
living authentically is harder for some people than it is for others. So for me, what you see is what you get. You might not like it, but what you see is what you get. So I'm truly authentic. However, when I profile people using so I use the DISC model. That's the foundation, but I've created my own version which links to health and well-being. So I can look at somebody's behavior profile patterns and I can tell you who's being authentic, who's not being authentic. I can tell you what their symptoms are in terms of health and well-being. There's all kinds of shizzle that I can tell from the profile, but it's the stories, it's the backstories. It's not necessarily the actual behavior patterns. So a lot of people come to the table presenting as somebody else. They're presenting as somebody that they think they should be, whether the table is school, work, some kind of peer pressure, whatever. If they're not presenting as their true natural selves, their authentic selves, they will inevitably build up health challenges. So on a short-term basis, it's not an issue. We've all got the opportunity to adapt. We can all be somebody we're not, but we can't do it on a long-term basis. And that's the challenge. And that's why you need to get behind the story. And when so I mentor students in schools in England. I've done lots of mentoring and team development and all kinds of stuff over the years. But what I'm always looking for is the level of adaptability. And that is where we look at the resilience. So where somebody has a high level of resilience. So for example, just to put it into context, most people that I profile are only adaptable something like 15 to 20% of the time. Most people are actually less than that. My adaptability is somewhere between 65 and 90%. And that's how I've managed to get through all these different things that have happened to me over the years, not just the cancers, there's all sorts of other things that have happened. So the more flexible you are, the more adaptable you are, the more you're able to then, ride the storms. And when people understand what their behavior characteristics are, they can then understand how to optimize their situation rather than putting themselves in a situation where they're always playing against the opposite team, so to speak. So don't put yourself in a situation where you're continually working against who you are. Put yourself in a situation where you're playing to your strengths, and thereby your limitations, I don't use the word weaknesses, so your limitations will raise by default. So concentrate what you're good at. Don't stress about the stuff that you're not so good at, and then by default you'll get a better balance in life.
So you say our backstory is, a big part of what shows our resilience, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think that, so the home life of, say, a young person, maybe a family that does eat more at the table, of course, I'm going to always bring it back to this.
Yeah.
How does that add to their resiliency?
So I've profiled thousands in the last 30 odd years. I've profiled thousands and thousands of individuals, young people, business people, whatever. I go back to when I was first trained 25 plus years ago, and I volunteered in schools, and I was mentoring actually head teachers. There was a scheme in the UK where they recognised that head teachers weren't head teachers as, they weren't teachers, they were business managers. They were running a business. The school is running a business. So the head teachers haven't got a clue about running a business. So I was brought in as one of the consultants to help them. And then I noticed that the people who were the students who were thrown out of school, so I had a lot of impact in the classroom as well as the senior management team in schools. But the kids that were thrown out of class were those that didn't agree with the teacher. And of course, the teacher came off better. So as a result, I ended up volunteering with what we call in the UK, pupil referral units. Every single student had my profile, every student, without exception. So all these years I've been, again, volunteer mentoring with students in some schools in a particular area in the UK. And recently I had 8 profiles that came up. So I've got my own tool, my own system now behind the scenes on my website. And we had 8 profiles that came in. Every single one of them, again, was my profile. So how can what we need to learn, understand how we can help these students. They are not geared, they're not made to sit there, put up, shut up in the school environment. They are our next business leaders. We need to be able to identify these students, catch them before they get themselves into trouble. I used to bunk off school in the days when that was allowed. I mean, goodness knows how you bunk off school today with all this digital blah blah stuff that goes on. But I used to bunk off school. I used to go to the local cemetery and I could recite all the different tombstones and the social history and all the rest of it. So I don't know how the kids manage today other than being slung out of school. And that's not fair. That's really not fair, because the schools need to understand how to manage and motivate these individuals. If people like me aren't challenged, we make our own entertainment up. We might get ourselves into trouble, as I've done many times. But if we were challenged in the right way, so if I had been guided rather than being told, oh, you know, you're if only you focused, if only you were consistent, if only, you know, shove off. You know, I remember hitting a teacher around the face. I'm left-handed. I'm probably the oldest person here, I think. In the days when I grew up, being left-handed wasn't PC, and I remember the teachers, you know, looking down at me, wagging a finger, and me looking up, and I thought, I've had enough of this. I slapped her around the face. I don't think my parents ever knew about it, but had we been round the table, a family that were around the table, there probably could have been a conversation. You know, things might have been different. Who knows?
How can parents, one, either, you know, obviously they need to be, what Isla said, being listening and patient with their kids to hear what's going on with them, so that maybe they can hopefully hear and fix something on the home side. But now let's just say they've already got a reputation at school and the teachers are teaching them a certain, how can parents get more involved, and what is the right way to get involved with the schools or with the community, or what can we do for these kids so that
Okay. So
it's a better place for them?
Good question. If I had school-age children now, the last place I would send them would be to school. No way, Jose. I would not send them to school. I would home ed, no question whatsoever. That said, going back to the round the table, one of the things that I have created over the years is a different version of the DISC model. So Google the DISC model of behavioral profiling. You will come up with I don't know, millions. Last time I looked, it was 3+ million. There's probably more than that now. So the DISC model is one of the most popular systems of understanding and identifying people's behavior characteristics. And this is not about putting people in boxes. It's not about saying you're this style, therefore, you know, X, Y, Z is going to happen. And we're normally a blend of behaviors and characteristics. So when I was volunteering in schools hundreds of years ago, one of the head teachers came to me and said, I love all this stuff. Great. It's really helped with our senior management team. We better understand each other now. We know how to work, etc., etc. But I would really like to bring this in with the students. How can we do that? My children are kindy age. My students in the school, they're like 3-4 years old up to 10 or whatever it was. So we came up with animal pictures. So the first step was to identify the animals, which we did in a brainstorming session. And then she went back to her students, her teachers, and said, the kids need to learn about these different behaviors with the animals. So the D on the disc mnemonic is represented by the lion. So D is all about strong behaviors. It's about directness. It's about ego, taking control, taking charge, being challenged, etc. So high Ds, and that's the lion. The I is the dolphin, flitting here, flitting there, happy, chatty, lots of talk, entertainment, having fun. So we've got the lion, we've got the dolphin. We've then got the puppy dog, which is the S. That's about being supported. So the high S characteristics are so kind, loyal, patient, never making a decision, sitting on the fence in case they upset people. So very nice, mild-mannered people. These are usually the carers who are the most sickest on the planet because they're giving everything to everybody else. They're supporting everybody else, but they don't have the support themselves. And then you've got the high C, which is the owl. So the owl sits there, doesn't say a lot, looks around and takes everything in. When the owl says something, it's really profound, and you would never, ever, ever want to argue with somebody who's a high C because they will trounce you with the facts, the figures, paragraph this, subsection that, blah, blah, blah. So we're a blend of all those characteristics. So when you know what's around the table, you can then understand when you know your own characteristics. So one of the people, so I've created a DISC training program, and then I've developed a DISC academy. So one of my academy members who uses a DISC profiling in her work as a mental well-being coach, her family, they have her and her husband are both high D, so they're both lions. They've got 4 children. Three of them are lions. The 4th one is a puppy dog. So this poor lad is really getting short shrift because he's potentially being picked on by everybody else. And this is what happens in the workplace. It happens in the schools, it happens in families, around the dinner table, wherever. So when you understand your own behavior characteristics, the responsibility is up to you to manage yourself. So I know that I'm too much for some people. So you can't see it now, but I talk with my hands. My hands are jabbering away here on, by the computer screen underneath the camera. So I talk with my hands, which is off-putting for some people. So when I meet people in person who are less resilient and they're softer characteristics than I am, I will put my hands behind my back. I'll sit my mouth up. I'll listen more because these people need to be heard. So we can't go there spouting our opinions and our ego and all the rest of it all over the place. We need to understand how our impact reverberates, it's sitting at the bus stop, wherever.
Wow, that's I was, as you're describing all this, I'm picking the pieces of me out and I'm like, wow, yeah. And you know what? You'd be fine here in Italy. That's definitely not a problem here. Nobody will take offense because they're talking with their hands even more. Wow, that's wonderful. If gosh, what you've kind of covered, I had a bunch of questions for you, and you kind of covered them all. So you've done such a wonderful job. But is there anything else that you would like to share that you feel that anybody else could take? Now that makes, first of all, I got to say I'm very sad that you didn't have a life around the table growing up, and I do truly invite you to pop over here sometime and have some meals around my table, because I would love to share that with you and show you my crazy house. Because that definitely, I do, I enjoy my quiet once in a while, but I do miss the crazy big table full of people. That's where I get excited and where I thrive, so.
I'm very fortunate that I have lots of friends, so my profile is the lion and the dolphin. So I'm a high ID profile, and I am blessed with so many friends and people. I'm on my own. I've had 3 husbands. I'm now on my own. by choice for the last 20 something years. But I do miss family, which is why I've been married so many times, because each time things haven't gone right, I've missed family life, and then try again sort of thing, and then each time it's gone a bit wrong. But I'm the common denominator here, and when I look back, a lot of it, I know there's two sides to a story and all the rest of it, but I've taken responsibility. And I've been friendly with all my husbands over the last years. My first husband still contacts me nearly every day, bless him. He sends me the most rude and non-PC memes that you can ever imagine that I can't share with anybody, but it gives me a good laugh.
I often tell people, because when I'm talking about getting your family to the table, some people tell me, like, I have a friend who both her parents are gone. She has one sister that's gone. She had, she lives alone. She has no extended family. And so she is truly, truly alone in this world. And so we've had these conversations. Well, how do you create family if you don't have one? And you do, like you're saying, you have your friend, you can cultivate that family, because I always say, I have a couple friends I'm so close with that I call them the family I choose instead of the family I was born with, your family I choose, and you're my sister from another mister, or whatever, and it's truly something that can be just as special, because a close-knit friend group can take the place of, because you just need some people that will support you. And a table is a great place to start that connection. Invite somebody over for dinner, and the two of you have dinner. Then you have another friend, and you have three of you for dinner, and so on and so forth. So it is a great way to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always having parties. I've got lots of friends. Ashley, you had your hand up. Did you have a
I was just going to
question?
say that, yeah.
I mean, what you were talking there about, Elaine, there's so many systems out there certainly in Great Britain, because I know them well enough, although I'm a little bit younger. There's the healthcare system, which can sometimes be really constricted. There's the education system, all these other things. I was just wondering what you would share about that sense of how a child who might be a bit different, might not fit in, might not be compliant, might not be the top 70% who's meant to fit in, how they survive that if they have to stay in that system because their family might not think of other ways to get them out. And you had a little mention of, perhaps now on reflection, you might think about a homeschooling option. And I was just wondering what you see as the pros and cons, really, of those two systems, the home system versus the education system, not necessarily a British one, just the system.
Yeah. So my son is autistic. My son has Asperger's syndrome and ADHD. He's 30 now, and Andrew is from my third husband, who is also autistic, and his family are autistic going back generations. So autism is not something that you get by having jabs necessarily, although there's a big case for that. It can be hereditary. In our family case, it is hereditary. Had I known that, we didn't have a diagnosis for him until he was 12, and we had no end of problems. I moved from one end of the country to the other, excuse me, to get him into a private school because the mainstream school wasn't serving him at all. My PA I had for 8 years until she had a child, and then her child was also on the spectrum, and the screaming fits getting her child to school was just awful. So she now home educates her child, and everything's happy. Had I known what I now know, I would have not taken my child to school. I was forever at school arguing with the teachers and the head teachers. And I remember one situation, there were 13 people around a table, and dealing with the situation with Andrew. And I remember I got so cross, I stood up and I stamped the table and I said, I'm not leaving here until we get a resolution. This is a health and safety issue from the school perspective with Andrew's behaviours. And of course he was kicking off because he wasn't happy, he was frustrated, he couldn't articulate what was wrong. And we didn't know at the time about the challenges of autism, etc., etc. My son now, as I say, is 30. He self-harms. I had no idea until last year that he self-harms. You cannot put a pin between the self-harms on both of his arms. I had no idea at all. So these people suffer in silence. Had we had a table, that we could have spoken about this, I don't know if it would have made any difference or not. But look at the behaviours, look at the eye contact, look at what they're not saying as much as what they are saying. It's very difficult. There's no easy answer to the question, Ashley.
Well, thank you very much, Elaine, for all the insights and your wonderful stories, and I very much appreciate you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Before we go to our last speaker, I do want to bring up something very important, and that is that I couldn't have put this thing together without Summer. She's right there on the screen, and she is a whiz at putting things together and if anybody else here has a business or a mission like me that you want to get out there, she is wonderful at doing this. She's done all the techie. She's my techie chickie. There she is. And that's my name for her that I almost forgot.
Chicky, I love it. Just highlighted myself so people can see my beautiful face.
There you go. And she's modest. And but I will say that she has been a wonderful help to me, but she also believes in me, and she gave me so much support in this, and she believes in what we're doing. And I don't think I could work with anybody who doesn't believe in what I'm doing. So thank you, Summer, for all of your help. And please, would you make sure that you put your stuff in the chat as well, because you have been it's immeasurable what you've done for me. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and without you, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So
thank you. This is what I love doing. It's my passion. My biggest passion is bringing people together. And when you said bringing people together to the family table, I'm like, what the hell not, right? So exactly. Yeah, I organize summits for other people, and I've done a pretty good job. Like, everybody keeps praising me, and I love it. But sometimes I don't have that. Like, there's this summit about something that I don't really believe in, but all right, I will do it for you. But I'm
your favorite though, right?
You are my favorite. Yes,
okay,
yes.
Good. Okay.
And if you're not, I wouldn't say it loudly like this.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, you're one of my favorites. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been really awesome. And I'm loving the after comments that people are giving me in the emails. I'm going to share some of the emails with you. Some of the people are here for all the 3 days. You know what I want to have right now? I want to have people give us real feedback. Like, just raise their hands and tell us what they felt, how they felt about these 3 days, and what made it worth their while, worth their time. We just want to hear from everybody. I know some of you have been here all 3 days. That is lovely. You're going to first hear from Dr. Ash, and I'm going to take myself off spotlight.
Sorry for being a chatterbox. I've got my tea in the oven and I'm going to have to go off in a minute or else it'll burn. Yeah, I put it in the chat, but there's something about this, Darina. I met you, you enthused me, you were so exciting to listen to. And the thought about, coming to a summit, etc., did give me a bit of a heart sink, because I've been involved in a few over the years, and the techie side of it, or the communication side of it, can be glitchy. But honestly, you've saturated every part of, my email inbox, etc., in the right way, not as in it's just been awful, content that's really difficult. There's been conversation in the emails. It's been very warm, as in, do this, but, sometimes that might be difficult. Why not try that? And I honestly think that real human-focused style is really helpful. So, yeah, you've just got such a talent at this. And the fact that you've already said that it really gels well with Darina is written all over it. And so thanks ever so much for making it easy, because it just has helped it flow so well.
And now, what did you think of the summit? That's what I want.
Sorry.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, the summit, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, basically, it's been a smorgasbord. If you think about what's on the table, this has been a great buffet. I mean, we've had food, we've had tears, we've had sort of laughter. There's been a sense of listening to real granular detail about people's stories that they've been kind enough to share, and then some massive international research that we've had, talked about in certain settings. So, when it comes to thinking what you've got on the tin, we've opened this tin and there's a heck of a lot more in it than on the label. So yeah, thanks. I found it really, really stimulating, and also the people who've continued to be here. It just says a credit to the engagement. So thanks
Well,
ever so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Robert.
Yeah, so thank you, Summer. Yay! Because she had sent me an email and said, "Oh, you need to connect with Dorina. You'd be wonderful on that summit." And when I heard what it was about, I was immediately, absolutely yes. Because I just come from that tradition of being raised at the table, in my mother's lap, being fed, spoon-fed, So it was really wonderful. The speakers were really great, and it went beyond my expectations. It was even very difficult to just shut up and listen the whole time because I could join the conversation now. So it was just really great. All the speakers and the effort of both of you and Rena. More of that to come, I hope.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Robert.
So it was really beautiful. And thank you for having me and all the other great speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now nobody go anywhere. We have one more speaker that we're going to finish up with who I love dearly. So don't even think of leaving yet. We got a few more minutes to go. But anybody else want to share 2 cents?
I do
At
really
least a
quick.
couple more, please.
This is Jania, Dr. J. I'm not on
Go ahead.
camera because
Okay.
I have so much going on behind me, but
I'll spotlight you anyways. No,
I just
I
wanted to
cannot
say,
because you're
like,
not on camera. Okay.
right. I just really love the format that you have here. Like somebody put in the chat that it's not like death by, PowerPoints, and everybody speaking from a PowerPoint. And I'm sure everybody had notes, that they wanted to touch on things, but it really was a conversation, and needed conversations, knowledge, information, and really much more important, experience. Because that's really how we learn the most, is by learning from others people's experiences and what they take from it and how they have overcome through it. And so just writing notes and listening to what everybody's saying in their stories, even as a professional, it's like, wow, that's, really powerful, and still learning new things within my own field, and being able to share those things. My mom really enjoyed yesterday. She couldn't come today, but she really enjoyed. She stayed on all day yesterday, as a few of my friends did, and they were just like really like, wow, this is really cool, because it wasn't boring. It was engaging. It was funny. You shed tears. It was a little bit of everything, and I like just the diversity of what we're talking about, because all of these things come back to building bonds and coming together, which is what this is about. And you don't realize how these things all connect, but they do. And thank you, Dorina. Thank you, Summer, and all of the guests who have been here, because this has just been just fantastic for me.
Well, thanks, Jania. You're a dear, and I love you to pieces. So thank you for those kind words. But you're also your professional insight, which I very much respect. So thank you. We are going to go now to my last guest, who I also love dearly. My friend
Beautiful Beth.
Beth Barber-Boulay.
Bringing her up.
And I think it's a perfect end to this summit, because we're going to go up a generation. And Beth talks about and is passionate about this whole thing because it is something unique. Well, not even that unique anymore, because it seems like it's happening more and more, isn't it? It's grandparents raising their grandchildren, which, is unfortunately, but yet fortunately, because there are people like Beth who are stepping up to the plate and raising a grandchild. So welcome, Beth. I'm glad you're here.
I'm happy to be here too. I reflected on Chantal yesterday, talking about our why, and I had written in the notes, my why makes me cry. And it's taken me 4.5 years to get to the point where I can actually talk about this without crying. And for like 2 years now, I thought what I was doing was actually about helping grandparents. And what I realized more recently is that it's not really about helping the grandparents. It's about having them be more effective so that the children are resilient. So let me start by saying, I'm starting with the end of what I was going to say. Last night, I decided to conduct an interview with Danny because he knows I've been working on all this stuff. And we had salmon for dinner last night because it's lunch. It was Friday. And he told me he did not like salmon. He did not want it. But anyways, before bedtime, I said to him, "Did you like dinner? It was the best ever." Every dinner we have, he says, is the best dinner ever. And then I asked him, "Do you like helping to set the table and clear the table?" He said, "Yes." "Do you like having dinner at the table?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Why?" He said, "It's fun." He said, and I asked him, "What's fun?" He said, "We get to laugh." I said, "Do you like to say grace?" He said, "Yes." I just said, "Do you feel like a leader when you say grace?" He said, "Yes." And so last night I got to go to sleep with a box check next to the "you were doing the right things." And it seems like day starts at the table, my day ends at the table. And my whole journey started on this project with I was getting up early because I had a 26-month in the house, 26-month-old. I had no time to myself. I mean, there are days that Tom and I don't even get to shower. We get to the end of the day, it's like, we're like this with one another because we're busy. There's a lot to do when you've got a little person and you're 60 years old. And so I would get up early, I would come down, I'd have my coffee, I'd say my prayers, I'd do some journaling. And what I realized is I was creating an emotional space for myself that by the time Danny actually got up and came downstairs, I was ready to receive him into my day. And, he comes down every morning, we have the same routine. He comes over to my spot at the table, and he climbs up on my lap, and I'll ask, "Who loves you?" He says, "You do." "How much do I love you?" He says, "Watts and watts." "How long will I love you?" And he says, "Forever and ever, amen." And so that's our morning prayer. And then he'll climb down and go off and start his day. But that's how we ground every single day. And it's important for him and it's important for me. And what I've learned is he has a special operating system, and it's grounded in trauma. And the things that I have had to adapt to are, how do I help him be effective? It's not about me anymore. It's about helping him grow, to be strong, to be resilient, to be a learner. And there have been times that we have had issues at school. It was difficult. We put him into preschool. He had a hard time. We put him into Catholic preschool. He had a hard time. So I would take him out because he wasn't ready. We got him in kindergarten. They had me on speed dial. Now in first grade, I've learned to find my place and my voice, to stand for him, to get him the resources that he needs. And I don't back down anymore. And I really think that a lot of that comes from the fact that I engage at a level where I actually talk to him. I look in his eyes. I see the freckles across his nose, and I hear what he's got to say when he's talking to me. And it's frustrating. I mean, Tom is 61, I'm 60, Aiden's in college, he's 23. We're not at an age where you expect to have a child in the house all the time. And we're doing it out of season. And we've come to a point that the dinner table now is a good place for us. But the way it started was a phone call on a November night as we were preparing a spaghetti dinner. And we just put the water on for the pasta, and my phone rang, and Tom said to me, "Don't answer the phone." And if I hadn't answered the phone, Danny would have ended up in foster care. So I took the call, hung up the phone. Tom turned the water off. Off I went on a journey in a snowstorm to get Danny and brought him home. And our dinners began with, him coming into an environment where his whole world had been ripped apart from him. He was in a place where he wasn't with the adults he was used to being with anymore. He was malnourished. He was 19 pounds. And we were responsible for fixing the damage. And I have to say we, because I couldn't do this without all the support I've gotten from Tom and from my son. But our meal times, they were hard. He would stuff so much food in his mouth. He would eat till he'd vomit. He'd take food and he'd hide it under the couch, hide it in his bedroom, hide it behind his toy box. And we still, that's something that's in his unconscious mind now, that, food is scarce, that he isn't always going to be, he doesn't know if he's going to have food. So food hoarding is real. And he's learned now, he's gone from a point where he didn't trust, each meal. Is there going to be food the next meal? But now he knows there's always going to be meals. There's always going to be a clean bed. There's always going to be fresh clothes. There's always going to be somebody at the bus stop for him. But, he has this underlying anxiety about, is he safe? Is he going to be fed? He makes sure he knows, we know that when he's hungry. But our job isn't just to feed him, and it's not just to parent him, it's to teach him that he belongs. And, as I said, I was sitting at my spot at the table. Now he has his spot at the table too. And there are, things that he does, sitting at, his spot at the table. He helps set the table. He brings the napkins to the table. He brings the forks and knives out to the table. He brings his drink to the table. And that's really important for him to have that chore. And it's hard for little people like him that didn't eat at a table before to learn how to sit at a table. Having him fidgeting on the bench, off the bench, teaching him how to hold a fork, how to cut with a knife. And I've gone to birthday parties where, oh my gosh, you would not believe how children eat now. They have sporks at school, so they're scooping and shoving it into their mouth, and they don't know how to hold a fork and how to cut with a knife. We've moved on past a lot of those things, from him being neglected to testing boundaries and finding his voice. And so now sometimes if we're pushing his buttons, he'll talk with a loud voice. And, at first I'll have to say to him, are you being respectful? But deep inside me, there's something that says, this is really good, because he knows how to defend himself now. He's got that strength inside. And the biggest thing, out of all of this is consistency. Because in the morning we have our routine. On a school day, everything happens at a certain time. 7 o'clock is breakfast time. 7:30 is brush your teeth time. 7:45 is leave for the bus. 3:30 is pick up from the bus. And then Papa does the thing with the backpack. We have dinner. Bath time is at 7 o'clock. And dinosaurs go to bed at 8:15. His day is consistent, and routine is really, really important to him.
Routine and ritual, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, that's what we talked about before, right? And
yeah.
So the teaching about responsibility, confidence, and ownership at the table. Like my little interview with him, so even things like the dry things go on the left side. So your fork and your napkin go on the left side. The wet things go on the right side. So he knows that his drink and spoon are going to be on the right side. We keep his drink at 1 o'clock, because if it's not at 1 o'clock and he's fidgeting all over the place, the drink is going to get dumped. And when drinks get dumped, I'll say, was your cup at 1 o'clock? Right. Yeah. So, and he's learned, he keeps a napkin on his lap. And another thing that children learn at the table, and if they're not eating at a table, they're not going to learn to use a napkin. There's always a sleeve or whatever else they may use. But it's teaching him independence, and it's teaching him self-care. And, we're not quite ready for him yet with moving on to the next step of setting the full table or helping serve food. But he does, say grace, and he's cracked his first egg. He decided that he doesn't like cracking eggs. It's a little bit too slimy for him. But, so he wants to be a helper. He wants to be involved in the kitchen. He wants to be involved with setting the table. He clears his own plate, and he's learned how to be in conversation with us at the dinner table. And that's really important too.
And see, that's a lesson that any parent can take. And I think we probably, as a grandparent, we could probably almost do it better than we might have as a parent, because, I know I'll be a better grandparent than I was a parent, even though I was pretty good. But that's, it's such a great thing that you're showing him all these life lessons that start, at the family table, because it's a safe place for him, because he came from a place of not safe. And you're showing him that that food is not scarce, that the table's a safe place for him to eat, for him not to worry, and for him to have conversation and feel important. It's a beautiful thing you're doing. Now, you started a thing called Laszlo's Heart.
Right.
You want to share about that?
So, as I said, I thought it was all about grandparents, but really it's about preparing grandparents to care for the children. And that is all of the emotional processing that they need to go through to be effective and not carry this on another generation past where it's been. I mean, especially if there's been substance abuse. I mean, there are a lot of families that goes on for 4 or 5 generations of alcoholism and drugs and addictive behaviors. And, you don't know because you don't know. You don't get outside of that loop. And so the journaling sessions, the one that I've included in Summer just put up, is about an emotional closet. And it's about processing through all of those emotions, and whether they're in a negative state, energy state, a neutral energy state, or if they're shifting you to positive state, and the people that you engage with, and the thoughts that come to mind, things that provoke them, and how do they shift your energy, and how can you take your mindset and move it towards a more positive state with simple behaviors. And one of those exercises is, are you being selfless, or are you being in yourself? And if you're being selfless, you're really draining yourself, and it's harmful. And if you're being in yourself, then you're giving from your overflow. And you're rooted when you're giving from overflow. So I've offered like 3 or 4 different Tuesdays in April for people to participate in the journaling session. It's only an hour to work through it. And I'm talking with my hands too. I don't know if you can see it, but to work through these things. And I know this audience isn't grandparents raising grandchildren, but we all have emotions, and I'm not sure if it was Robert that talked about it yesterday, how they're the core of all of our interactions and how we express or suppress them. It influences our trust, connection, and communication. One of the speakers said that, and it's really true. And when we're communicating with a little person, what are we putting into their hearts the way we talk to them? Are we putting fear into them, shame, or are we actually pulling from them, right, and letting them tell us how they feel? We don't want to shut them down. We want to engage with them. So, we need to learn to be patient, to be present, to have perspective, to be playful and persistent. And it wasn't too long ago, I don't know what some kind of game I was playing with Danny. He told me I was just absolutely crazy. And being in touch with my inner child is really important. And I probably do that more now as a grandmother than I did it as a mother, because I'm more engaged now. I don't have a full-time corporate job where I'm traveling all over the world. I'm home every night. I'm up every morning. And I call this my legacy of love. So.
Well, I love that. I love, and everybody, you can all benefit from knowing this lady here, because she is, she inspires me. So, I can, and I talk to you and I get all emotional. Like look, this whole thing, this whole week, this whole 3 days here, the family table is not a magic cure, but it's one of the strongest protective tools we have. It's where we build belonging, where we build boundaries and buffers. It's a place where we can notice pain early, a place where we share our joy. It's a place to connect. And when kids feel known, when they feel seen, when they feel heard, when they feel safe, when they feel anchored at home, bad things in the world, just seem a little less, and we can solve a lot of problems, a lot of big problems even before they get started, before they actually happen. If you're looking at Danny across the table and he's sitting in his spot and he's not, looking too happy today after he gets, the day at school, you're going to notice it. You only notice these things when they're in front of you, and so I commend you for what you're doing. I think it's beautiful. I love the idea of having grandchildren. I have no idea what I would do if I had to raise a little one right now. But we do, those of us who believe in family, believe in legacies of love, would probably go ahead and do the same thing, because it's what we're supposed to do. That's what family's all about. Oh gosh, I'm gonna cry.
Okay. All right. So I'll fill in the space for you. All right. You had asked me how many grandparents are raising grandchildren.
Yeah.
And in the US, there are about 2.7 million grandparents raising their grandchildren.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And there are about 1 million grandmothers that are doing it alone on $20,000 a year. So they're probably doing it on their Social Security money. And then what other benefits they may get. And so there are a lot of children that are underserved, right? They're getting left behind in the educational system. They don't have opportunity afterwards. 11% of those children are because of the death of parents. The rest are because of imprisonment or neglect. So
is there such a thing as, I know that, okay, so for example, I have friends who homeschooled and there was homeschool groups that would get together. Are there grandparent groups, or is that something that we could start?
Yeah, so there really aren't a lot. There are a couple of podcasts, and like Focus on the Family has a program, but there's not AARP says they have a program, but really it's just some resources that you can go to. Catholic Charities has programs, but you have to pack up and go at 7:30 at night. And who's going to take their children out at night when they're old to begin with, you know, and it's almost bedtime. So, so it's isolating. That's the word. So we've had to give up our empty nest-ish social life. And, you know, we don't get to do those things. Like before we would pack our backpacks for a weekend and go to a football game somewhere, you know, to Cleveland or to Phoenix or wherever we might go. And just pack a backpack and off we go for the weekend. And we can't do that. But we have other things that we get to do instead, right? We get Tonka toys tearing up the backyard. I don't know. There's just a whole host of other things. So there are Nerf basketball hoops downstairs and craziness that I'm not invited down for because it's only the boys that are down there. And I ruin all the fun.
Oh gosh, I know that story. I know that story. With 5 boys and a husband, there was times where my kids, my living room and my kitchen and dining room and living room was an L shape, and there'd be all this thumping and whacking and stuff in the living room, and I couldn't see it. There was the only corner I couldn't see, and I'm kitchen cooking dinner, and would you guys stop? And I'm yelling from the kitchen, and they don't hear me, and so finally I walk over there, and who's in the middle of the fray? My husband. I'm like, geez, yeah. So yeah, but you know what? It's going to keep you young. It's going to keep him young, and you know, let them play. That's all you can do.
Right. That's what we do is we play. They wrestle. All sorts of noises come from that too. I just stay out of it. I'm told I'm not invited. Another thing you asked about was keeping spirits up when feeling abandoned. And you know, there are times that Danny will say to me, I really miss my mom. Choke.
No, that's your daughter.
So it's just a matter of holding space. So I miss her too. And so we just move through it together. And hope, you know, that's how, you know, maybe when she's feeling better, you know, she can't take care of herself. Maybe when she's feeling better, we'll be able to spend time with her. And he'll be okay with it. It's because we talk about it instead of just ignoring it. Right? And I've told him, you can talk to me about anything. You know, and little kids, you know, they test, they tell little fibs and stuff. It's like, listen, honesty is really, really important. And you want us to be able to trust you. And so you have to be honest with us if you want us to trust you. And it could be things like imaginary things. Like the other day, he told me that maybe it was a pig that came in the house and ate the things that were eaten. You know, because there's some stuff that was missing. You know, well, maybe it was a pig that came in here, and I was like, well, was it a little pig named Danny? You know, so you know, let's just be honest with it. Yeah, so these little maybe it was those things have been happening, and you know, you can't brush it off. You know, you have to hold them accountable. Let's be honest about things. And because the one thing we want him to know is that we are going to love him unconditionally, right? No matter
what. You have
what.
given him the biggest gift you could give him, that anybody could give him, because not only are you someone, you are still family. And you know, I unfortunately I've met a lot of people that's like that grandparents who are of the thoughts that I raised my kids, I'm done, you know, and I've heard, it's sad, but I've heard that a lot. And you know what, if something happened, God forbid, that I had to take care of one of mine, in a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. Any of my kids could move back in with me, any grandchildren, anybody,
Mhm.
or my friend's kid, I don't care. If we don't live in community, if we don't live like a family, if we don't show the love, what'd you call it? The legacy of love. That is anybody's legacy
Mhm.
is love, you know, and we need to show love because if you want love, you get love. If, you know, I always say, you know, when I play the smile game, you know, the smile and wave, because that's my thing, you know, instead of having road rage, I just, the person that's flipping me off, I can't do it here, you know, but the person that's flipping me off, I just smile and wave. And because you don't know what their day is like, but also, you know, I don't need to get angry and I don't need to do that. But you know what? When we share beauty, when we share smiles and waves, when we share love, the world's a better place. Absolutely. You're part of making that world a better place. Absolutely.
Well, and you had also asked about kinship versus foster care. So kinship care, yes, there's so many things. They're still connected to family, right? So they've got that root and connection. Um, and they get to have tradition, right? They follow Danny is learning all of our family traditions, and whether it's St. Patrick's Day and you know we have silly hat night on St. Patrick's Day, so everybody has to come to the table with you know either green hat or necklace or something silly in their hair or whatever. So you know we have our traditions and Christmas and certain you know whatever decorations are on the table for each holiday season. And he gets excited about, he knows that they're coming again because now it's almost, you know, I'm getting ready to put the Easter stuff out. And so he's learning his own traditions. Children that are in foster care don't have that. And they're bounced from house to house. They perform lower in school. They get lost in the shuffle, literally lost in the shuffle. There are something like 20,000 children that go missing every year in the foster care system. And the foster care system is saving the government something like $4.4 billion a year. And in the meantime, they don't support grandparents. Once you're a grandparent and you take guardianship, you get no support, whether it's childcare, right? If you're younger, say I was in my 50s still and working full time and doing what I did, I wouldn't get the child care. In Colorado, Danny's guaranteed health care until he's 18 years old. Children age out of foster care. And at that point in time, if it's a true family environment that they put into, those people are going to keep the child around. But it appears that for the most part, when the children age out, they're asked to leave because the family's not going to receive a check anymore.
Wow.
And so now I mean, there are kids here in Colorado Springs that they have these like tiny homes for, so the kids have a place to live when they turn 18 and they can't be in that home anymore. So what has that taught them? They've been abandoned and kicked around and then abandoned again. So it's Danny will never age out of our family. And that's an important thing for kinship care. And the other thing is our family values are the same family values we've always had. And he is learning those values too. My son Aiden takes him to church on Sundays. He says grace, he says his bedtime prayers, you know, and all that's part of him learning to be a Catholic. And so he identifies as that now too. So he's not just one of us. He doesn't just have a spot. And he's not just a first grader, but he's also a Catholic. And so he's getting those family values and he's turning into a pretty good little person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And all that, you know, pretty much happens right here around our table.
Well, Beth, you've got like I said, I think you've inspired everybody here with your story and also generously have a whole bunch of links here to share with people think you get the prize for the most gifts given away here.
Oh.
And, but you're a giver. It's obvious. So, you're creating a great space for this kid, and he is a piece of your family, and he feels it, and that your table is a safe place.
Mhm.
So thank you for being a great example of what extended family really means, and what taking care of our own really means, and just giving love. So thank you. Thank you for being you.
Thank you for
So-
having me.
I'm glad you were here. So, now we have come to the end of our 3 days. And some of you have been here all 3 days, which I just can't believe. And there's other people who've come for 3 days, maybe not the whole day every day, but I am humbled by all of you, by those of you who agreed, because when I first started doing this, when I first started looking into this possibility, I sent out a bunch of emails and messages to people, do you want to, and I kind of shot high, and all of a sudden it was like, I don't know, a week or so. And I think I messaged Summer and like, I don't know if this is going to work. And all of a sudden somebody answered me. And then, I got the nerve to ask Renee, who opened up for us. And, she just opened for Tony Robbins a couple weeks ago. I'm like, yeah, she's not going to answer me, even though we're friends. She answered me. And then I got all these other great people that answered me. And it happened. And I think that this was something that was supposed to happen. This message has to get out. My mission to revive the Rosetta Effect, get families back to the table, is my mission. And I hope that now any of you that have been a part of this, you're now part of my mission. Because if you spend 5 minutes with me, that's it. You are now an ambassador for the Rosetta Effect. Go on my page, my Doreena's Kitchen Facebook page, or my Instagram, or my YouTube channel, get a recipe, and bring your family to the table. Share the recipe, share my page, because you want to help me get this message out. It really has a lot of meaning. And like I told you my one story earlier, and just the fact that I have my 6 kids, and that, they have been my greatest inspiration. Everything I do is for them. The big table, we had an 8-foot table. Our dining table, 8 foot long, 4 feet wide. Okay, we could get a lot of people, and a lot of people around that table, and a lot of food on it. And the table was always full of food and people. And it's one of my happy places. And, everybody's like, sit down. I'm serving, I'm running around the table. And I do get to sit down, and I eat a little teeny bit because I've been so busy and I'm tasting stuff as I go along. But my joy, more than sitting at the table with them, is looking at them and taking it in and seeing all of them holding these conversations and passing the bread, well, tossing it. They usually toss the rolls across the table because I have boys, and they do stuff like that. But that's my joy. That is what makes me happy. So, on that note, if anybody who's here, I can't believe you guys have all stuck around all the way till the end. This is wonderful. I want you all to know that, I too I have my stuff. Summer, would you throw my stuff up in the chat too, just for the heck of it, if you have it handy? I've got do you have my recipe thing too? Okay. I have 5 free recipes you can have, little tip. It's a little taste of some of my favorite family things, like my fruit crumble, that I've thrown out to give you guys, as well as a couple of tips. And if you're interested, or someone who needs some help getting their family back to the table, starting from the whole kitchen thing, because we make it complicated. We talk about, oh, I don't have time. cooking, I don't know how, all these things. Or it makes too much mess. I don't know how, or every time I shop for, I got a recipe. Listen, it's so much simpler. It's really not as hard as people want to make it. So I can help you get your kitchen organized. I can help you learn how to set your stage for success in your kitchen, around your table, and with your family. And then if you really screw it up like you might want to talk to Dr. Ashley or one of these other wonderful people who can help you fix it before you screw it up too bad. Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyway. But I think that I think we're on a good path here, and we're just going to keep doing this because I really thought this was a fun thing, and I think that we're going to keep it up. And of course, if you want to see what a real back to the table life looks like, come check it out. Come see me in Italy. I've got these trips that are amazing, if I do say so myself, where you can actually live the Roseto effect in Roseto here in Italy, because I love sharing it, and this is my joy. So let me share my joy with you. Does anybody have anything they want to come up? Anybody? The floor's open. We'll stay a few more minutes, and if anybody wants to raise their hand and say something or share something, anybody got a story or a question? Of course, Dr. Ashley, come on up.
I'm full of energy now because I've been eating while I was listening to Beth speaking, crying and eating. Interesting combination. A lovely story that's only getting bigger and bigger, isn't it? But yeah, no, just one thing I was thinking. Not everybody feels comfortable or wants to sort of speak up, and I was wondering how we can send our more than 2 cents after this so that we can share, what we've loved about it, what we want more of, because I personally think this is a grower. This is not a drop in the ocean. There's so much more that we could grow from this, because everybody here has contributed such an interesting summit. So that was just one of my thoughts.
You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to throw all of my connection things right here in the chat. So it's all my social media links, all my everything, that's me right there. So yes, I welcome emails, messages, phone calls, whatever. Just remember I'm in Italy, so if you want to call me on WhatsApp, but that is my American phone number. And I will be in the States for a couple of weeks in April seeing grandbabies. So yes, feel free to contact me. In the meantime, anybody who's been part of this will get an email with as soon as they're done, because since I am married to a video producer and editor, he is editing all the videos so that we can have individual ones, as well as we're gonna put one video on my YouTube channel that's the whole 3 days. With little breaks in the middle so you can like forward or whatever, but we're also going to have them individually all on a channel on my channel. So you'll be able to come back and see these anytime you want and get inspired, I hope, and share it with other people, and let's keep sharing and moving this stuff around. So anybody else have raise a hand if anybody else has a question or a comment or anything at all. Let's see who's been writing in the
Deborah says, Dorina, you're like a magnet. Look at all the wonderful people you draw towards you and towards your mission.
Oh, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Deborah, I've noticed you've been on here I think all 3 days, 2 days, 3 days. You're awesome. I'm gonna have to connect. And Roseanne Falcone, are you a Rosetan?
Yes, I am.
Woohoo! And I know Colleen is too, who's been watching. So I love having my paisans on here, remembering our Roseto effect. Where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up?
Yeah.
I was born in England, but grew up in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, so you're one of the Toronto Rosetani.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Have you been to Roseto, Italy before?
Oh, yes, I've been several times, but not lately. I plan to come. Well, I was planning this year, but it didn't work out because I broke my leg in January. So I've been, yes, I had a bit of an injury, but I'm still
Have
nursing.
we met?
No, we have not met, but I
Okay.
follow you on social media, Dorina, so I'm quite familiar with you and I quite enjoy everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Rose,
right.
would you like to come on camera and say something nice about the summit, about your general takeaway from here?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes.
Oh, the only reason I'm not on camera is because I've got some people here in my home, and so I just,
Oh,
yeah,
well, thanks for listening, even though you've got people there. That's great.
they're watching you as well, Doreen. They said no,
Oh,
but
wonderful. Well,
yeah.
thank you. That's okay. I appreciate it. Anyway, well, thank you, everybody. I'm not going to keep you much longer. If anybody else wanted to say anything else at all, if
I'll just
not,
give a quick shout out.
I was just going to ask, can Summer, let's get everybody on screen, or let's get the open, whoever's on, whoever can, I'm going to get a screenshot. If whoever can come on screen, go ahead and, I mean, I guess so everybody who is can, whoever can is already. That's all right. We'll get that. I got a couple other screenshots, so I'm happy. But I'm happy seeing all of you here, and I do very much appreciate you all having been here. I don't even know what else to say or how to end this. I feel like an Italian saying ciao, 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 ciao. Because we
Well,
say
big
goodbye
shout
for a
outs
while.
to Colleen. Colleen's been here all 3 days. Robert Tetero's been here all 3 days. Dr. Ashley. Al Chan's been here, I think, a few minutes less than you and me, Dorina. Al Chan's been here from open to close every single day.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Al. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I haven't been to Lesotho yet. I've only been to Rome and Venice.
Oh, yeah? And so
Yeah,
now
how far is
you're
it from Rome?
we are
Lesotho?
about 4 hours from Rome.
Oh,
If you're an Italian, it's quicker. If you're not an Italian, it's a little longer.
okay.
They drive a little faster.